Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt live inside the Beltway on this Monday morning. I hope you're doing well out there. Cleveland Browns took a tough loss yesterday, and I'm being taunted by Mark Davis and Mike Gallagher, other various scruffy characters of the radio world. They're just jealous. They're just jealous because the Browns were down two cornerbacks, both starting tackles, both starting cornerbacks, and of course Jarvis Juice Landry. And they still came up 6 points short, and they almost won it at SoFi playing away. So they're 3-2. They've lost to the Chiefs and they've lost to the Chargers. Lose early, win late. That's the Browns' way when they're on their march to the Super Bowl. So that doesn't upset me. That doesn't upset me at all. I do want to begin the show by telling you I'm going to be in Atlanta on this Wednesday night. And I'm really looking forward to it because I'm looking at the brand new Financial Times story this morning. United Kingdom government bonds fall after inflation comments from rate setters. The Bank of England is now concerned that inflation has gotten out of control in the United Kingdom. Now, when we set up the Biden inflation show with Brian Westbury and Alfredo Ortiz for Wednesday night in Atlanta, we did so 5 months ago, knowing that inflation might be at 3 or 4%, thinking it might start to rise next year. It's already upon us, and it's raging. And so it's really the Biden stagflation, given the job reports on Friday after I went off the air. The very disappointing job report came out. The economy is back to the 70s. And Brian Westbury, Alfredo Ortiz, and I are going to talk about it. But we're also going to be joined by Herschel Walker. So you got to come out and meet Herschel. Tickets are available at am920theanswer.com, am920theanswer.com. We got 2 days left. There are only a few tickets left. Go over there and get them. Don't be mad at me, but I'll see you on Wednesday night in Atlanta. Ed Morrissey is going to be in for me on Thursday and Friday as I have to wing off to California. But do not miss me in Atlanta on Wednesday night. Now, the most important thing is that you need to hear Joe Biden take questions after the jobs report came out on Friday. Cut number one.
Today, we received more evidence of the progress we're making. And I know we can make a lot more in the days ahead. I want to thank you, and God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you very much.
Oh, what do you know? He didn't take any questions. Joe Biden doesn't take any questions. What a surprise. Luckily, Terry McAuliffe did, so I've got lots of material. Glenn Youngkin is running for governor of Virginia against Retread Terry, the most arrogant individual in American politics, I think. So Terry McAuliffe is flailing down in the polls, had the worst week possible, botching a debate and a roundtable by first telling parents they shouldn't be involved in their kids' school boards, and then second, to an African-American journalist telling her that her questions about critical race theory, she asked 3 times, were dog whistles. So he tried to kiss and make up with Dana Bash with the liberals in California, because he's losing, liberals in Virginia, he's losing votes to Princess Blanding, who's a third-party progressive African-American woman who is running and siphoning off lots of votes. There's no enthusiasm for Terry McAuliffe, who's frankly, he's out of gas. He's just going through the motions. Cut number 15, Terry McAuliffe tries yet again to talk about schools and education in Virginia. Cut 15.
I really hate to see what Glenn Youngkin is trying to do to Virginia, what Donald Trump did our country. I really hate to see the division, the hatred. We're putting these children in this horrible position. Let's just be clear. We don't teach critical race theory. This is this is a Trump, Betsy DeVos, Glenn Youngkin plan to divide people. And it really bothers me.
You see, Dana asked him what about critical race theory, and once again he didn't answer. It continues. Cut number 16.
I guess going back to 2000, do you think Republicans stole that election?
In 2000? Uh-huh. I wish the United States Supreme Court had let them finish counting the votes.
Yes, he still thinks it was stolen. See, Glenn Youngkin can't go anywhere given that he's running against parents and he's running against the 2000 election, and he's trying to make Trump into Glenn Youngkin and Glenn Youngkin into Trump, which isn't flying. And so Dana Bash says this, cut number 17.
Other issue, you mentioned Donald Trump. I'm glad I have 2 cups here so I can keep drinking when you mention Donald Trump's name. But
yeah, see, that was her trick. She had 2 cups of water and she took a drink every time Terry McAuliffe mentioned Donald Trump's name, and it was funny. Because that's the whole campaign. He's getting crushed. He's getting crushed. I think it's going to be one of those how did we get this so wrong elections? Because Democrats don't like him. African-American progressives are voting for Princess Blanding. Glenn Youngkin is a perfect candidate from Central Casting who's done a terrific job as a new face with a great appeal on the stump. So I'm pretty happy about that. Here are the headlines. Youth voter turnout in Virginia soared with Trump in office. Will it stay that way? This is called Throw Terry a Lifeline. Maybe the kids will help him. No, they're not going to vote for him. Then suddenly two papers, our biggest two papers, the Post, the Wall Street Journal, the three biggest are the Post, the Wall Street Journal, and the Times. Two of them have stories. Here's the Wall Street Journal. Biggest U.S. retailers charter private cargo ships to sail around port delays because you can't get your goods to land. And then the New York Times. It's not sustainable what America's port crisis looks like up close. It looks like I've run by it, and perhaps this coming Saturday I'll be back in Huntington Beach to see how bad the oil spill is. Lines and lines and lines of ships out to sea waiting to land the goods. Southwest Airlines, if you're flying on Southwest today, make sure you call ahead. They've had to cancel 800 flights on Saturday and more than 1,000 flights on Sunday. Hopefully they're getting back to normal. They blamed air traffic control and disruptive weather, but it's not really clear why only Southwest Airlines got the deal. Millions of kids' coronavirus shots are ready to go. Initial doses to be shared on a population basis. Expect the okay from the FDA whenever they get around to it. Yeah, don't worry about it because, you know, what? It's not a crisis. We'll look at it in 3 weeks, they told us on Friday. The kids are going to be safer when they get the vaccine. There is a new story from the Israeli press this morning about the fairly rare, but nevertheless risk you don't want to run, of post-childhood COVID disease. There are about 20 jump in hospitalization of kids with post-COVID syndrome that killed a teen. There are only 25 cases of this in the world, but why run the risk at all? Your children aren't going to get sick from the vaccine. They're not going to get very sick from COVID either. But some 25 kids around the world have died from PIMS, P-I-M-S. 35 children have been hospitalized with the syndrome in Israel, including a boy age 6 and a 6-month-old baby. It comes after they get COVID. So when the childhood vaccination is available, if you get it, you'll reduce the already small risk of PIMS. Hundreds of thousands of U.S. troops have not yet complied with the virus mandate. Well, I'll bet you that's going to be a number that doesn't shrink very much more. I don't think dishonorable discharge is going to be the appropriate remedy, but discharge will be. It's an all-volunteer army. When they signed up, vaccines weren't mandated. You could figure out what was on the way. Seems to me to be an excellent opportunity for honorable discharges for people who don't want to take it. I saw Bond. I'm not going to give you any spoilers. Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I saw Bond. I'll just tell you what the Wall Street Journal says. Latest James Bond film falls behind predecessors as COVID-19 concerns linger. That's not the only concern. U.S. Navy engineer and spouse charged in attempt to sell nuclear submarine secrets. These were civilians who worked for the Navy. They were not. You know, they make it odd. The headline, Navy nuclear engineer and his wife charged with trying to share submarine secrets with a foreign country. Look, you dummies, if you try and do that, we're going to find you. The FBI is pretty good at that. From the Wall Street Journal, severe drought adds to Afghanistan's woes, endangering millions as economy collapses. That's remarkable. By the way, another flight got out over the weekend. Another 20 American citizens, another 80 LPRs, by virtue of a third-party group, got out over the weekend. They're lying to us about how many people are there, but now we're finding out a desperate drought is going to hit Afghanistan. And the Taliban, of course, will be exactly the water engineers you think they are when it comes time to arranging water relief. Finally, a very long story in the Washington Post on Wisconsin. It's not about the Wisconsin football team. By the way, it's Victory Monday for the Ohio State Buckeyes. The Browns may have gone down at SoFi last night, but the Buckeyes won 66-20 or something like that. Oddly enough, because of the SEC Mafia, the Alabama team only fell to 5 after losing to number 12 or 13 Texas A&M. Ohio State fell to number 8 after losing to number 5 Oregon. It just doesn't make any sense except for the SEC nonsense. Don't go anywhere, America, especially not to the Alabama Booster film breakdown. Nick will be in bad shape. But stay right here. The voice of reason is back. Hugh Hewitt is on the air, the Ted Lasso of talk radio. Stay tuned.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Job Creators Network.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
Powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized.
We are now all rooting for his success.
That's not what happened. It was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
This is what third world security states do. They spy on their political opponents like this.
This is part of a concerted Russian influence operation.
Russians, I'm not going to be specific as.
But he knew he could just say it on TV and then hide behind, well, it's all classified, I can't get into it.
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence. It's given people who are bad faith actors a license to do whatever they want.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
I have never seen in my life the orchestrated hatred to a group of Americans as I am seeing now. It's orchestrated hatred. You are allowed to hate the unvaccinated. Even if the unvaccinated had COVID already, and there is no scientific reason whatsoever for them to take as minimal a risk as it is the vaccine. You are to hate these people. They are killers. They are killing you and themselves. This is this piece of crap governor of California on television.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Larry Elder Show.
I really do think it's time to revolt. And I'm not talking about go crazy. I'm not talking about, grab your arms and get out in the street and go crazy. I just think it's time to stop listening to these guys. We know what they're up to. These guys are post-constitutional. They're circumventing your power. They're gaining power for themselves or accumulating power for themselves. That's all they want to do. And it's up to us to just resist. It's up to us, as a matter of fact, when it comes to Christmas, I'm looking forward to inviting more people over. I'm trying to think of who else I can throw on the list. I'm like, forget Fauci. Forget him.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
This is Carol Platt Liebau for townhall.com. It's not surprising that Joe Biden wants to turn the page on his incompetent withdrawal from Afghanistan and the abandonment of U.S. citizens and our allies there. Almost as unsurprising as the media's craven effort to help him. Even as Americans remain hostage in Afghanistan and the Taliban flaunts the military equipment we left them, the news has shifted to other domestic stories. It's inexplicable. Their silence is a scandal. But sadly, we've grown used to seeing the media try to influence public opinion in a way that benefits their chosen candidates. Let's hope that this time, Americans see through the manipulation. So long as America is being humiliated by a group of Taliban savages and our fellow citizens or captives, we deserve the full story. We should demand that the media give it to us. I'm Carol Platt Liebau.
The Pepperdine Graduate School of Public Policy, for those considering careers in politics and policy.
Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
So Joe Biden thinks that an illegal chasing a U.S. senator into a ladies' room is part of the process and happens to everybody. Wow. I'm guessing nobody's able to chase Joe Biden into the men's room. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that it's not part of any process he has to face. It's unbelievable the way the machine, the beast, looks the other way when something as reprehensible as illegals, good argument against that.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on
Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt. I love the Ted Lasso music. I am the Ted Lasso Talk Radio. I wish I had been here on Friday to cushion the blow of a terrible jobs report. This market update is brought to you by Birch Gold. And more people are buying gold because they look at these statistics and they say stagflation is here. If you're going to buy gold, do it from hughgold.com or text my name, Hugh, to 474747. Birch Gold has been sponsoring the first market update of every day for as long as I can recall. On Friday, the Dow was down 8. The S&P was down 8. The NASDAQ was off a whopping 74 points. That was after a very depressing jobs report came out. The Squawk Box panel was on live. I'd gone off the air when CNBC was broadcasting the jobs number. Here's their reaction, cut number 2.
Things are coming down pretty rapidly. We just have this jobs report. Steve, what do you see?
194.
Whoa.
I see 194,000. That is real low.
Real bad job report. CNN also reported the news this way. Matt Egan on CNN, cut number 3.
Okay, it definitely was a complex report, and a lot of that was because of the Delta variant and the reopening of the economy. But that means there's kind of something for everyone here in terms of the positives and the negatives. Now, clearly, the big negative is the fact that the economy added just 194,000 jobs last month. That is less than half of what economists have been anticipating. And as you can see, there was a surge in hiring this summer, but that has clearly faded big time. This was actually the worst job gain of the entire year. And so that means the U.S. economy is still down 5 million jobs.
Romans on CNN as well, cut number 5.
On Off the Presses, a brand new jobs report, a look at the state of the economy. Chief business correspondent Christine Romans with the new details. What does it say?
All right, let me just run through the top line numbers for you here, John, because it's a real brain teaser. 194,000 net new jobs added, way less than anybody expected, and less than last month and the worst of the year.
Can we play that again? Because she sets you up to maybe think it's not terrible. Cut number 5.
On Off the Presses, a brand new jobs report, a look at the state of the economy. Chief business correspondent Christine Romans with the new details. What does it say?
All right, let me just run through the top line numbers for you here, John, because it's a real brain teaser. 194,000 net new jobs added, way less than anybody expected, and less than last month and the worst of the year.
Oops, Labor Secretary, do you even know who it is? I couldn't name it. It's my job to know this sort of stuff, but Marty Walsh is so invisible I had no idea. Marty Walsh commented on the jobs report, cut number 6.
Also in the educational sector, there's something going on there that we have to do some more research on, particularly the educational public sector number. I think a lot of people expected with school starting that would see that number a lot higher, and certainly that's the number was in some cases not as disappointing. I'll say it was disappointing.
Disappointing was a disaster. Representative Mike Sherrill of North Dakota said this on MSNBC, cut number 4.
Critical needs. You were talking about the jobs numbers. Something that no one seems to be talking about, and I didn't hear it from your panel, is how bad those jobs numbers were for women. Yeah. We have seen again and again and again how bad our jobs numbers are for women. And I have heard the same thing that your panelists kind of alluded to from people in my district.
This woman Cheryl goes on. It's just a terrible jobs report all the way around. One more cut. Stephanie Pomboy on Fox Business talking about the jobs report Friday. Cut number 7.
I think the number, getting to your point about workers having, companies having a hard time getting workers in this environment of endless stimulus. The number from this morning's report to focus on is 183. Minus 183. That's how 183,000 people dropped out of the labor force in September. That's an amazing number, and it's not a good one.
So bad. You need to come, if you're anywhere near Atlanta, you ought to drive up from Florida or down from North Carolina, come to Georgia and find out in Atlanta on Wednesday night what is going on with this economy. I'll be there with Brian Westbury and Alfredo Ortiz of Job Creators Network. We'll be joined by Herschel AM920theanswer.com for tickets. If you need gold, though, and gold this morning is trading at, let me see what gold is trading at, $17.53 an ounce. Go to hughgold.com or text my name, Hugh, to 474747. Roll over a portion of your IRA into a gold-backed IRA administered by Birch because stagflation is coming. Stay tuned.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
About your time in the White House.
The way I use those
What
on...
kind of a ride that was for you. We played this clip at the beginning of this insanity. Why didn't you mention this? You mean the thing I talked about 2 days ago at length from this point? But he didn't tweet about it. I mean, just the sheer insanity. Talk to us about what that was like to live through. And then give us your take on what went wrong in the Trump administration. What went right, what went wrong?
So, I mean, look, it was tumultuous. It was intense. I think that, look, this goes back to what we were just talking about. Trump upset the apple cart. And every president, both parties that come in, need three groups, right? You need the press, you need donors, and you need sort of the permanent K Street lobbyist types. Trump's view was, if you want to join me, great, but I don't need you. Yeah. And what happened was...
Because he won without them.
Yes. And they were... But here's the thing. I'll say it in a very PG way, but like they're used to having their butt kissed. And they're used to people saying, I'd love to have you come over to my house in Georgetown for a dinner party where we can discuss the ins and outs of the NATO, it's like they want you to, and he was like, look, I'm doing this. I'm doing it this way.
If you want to join me,
If you want to join me, great, but I don't need you. And it pissed them off.
Yeah, this especially the conservatives who thought that they were, the Bill Crichtals of the world. So, what do you mean you're not coming to me for a briefing as a candidate?
How do you do this?
How dare you?
How dare you? I'm part of the institution.
Right.
I come
Kiss
with
the
the
ring.
I come with the drapes.
Right.
And I think that was upset, and especially for the press corps. And that was their thing, is that they were like, you're supposed to do this. You're supposed to act this way. You're supposed to... And again, my sort of marching orders from Trump were get my message out, do what I want.
So
keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
The Democratic Party somehow has convinced black people that they're the good guys. Never mind the skanky history of the Democratic Party. That was a party of slavery. There is a whole big cottage industry for racism. If racism went away, a lot of people would be unemployed.
The mob during the Minneapolis riots following the death of George Floyd. A bunch of white thugs, frankly, burning down the city's traditional black and Asian business district.
They're racist. Everything's racist.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
There is this question of, is America becoming a safer country or a more dangerous country? So Merrick Garland did not issue a memo condemning the fact that murders are up 30% since last year. 30% murders are up. So murders are up 30% in the last year. And Merrick Garland instead issues a directive saying that we're not going to go try to find the spike in violent crime, like the abolishing police force, BLM Incorporated, how these ideas of CRT are actually resulting in more people being dead.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
In light of the belief of the CDC that 99%, 99% of the, help me out here, of the vaxxed, 99% of those hospitalized are not vaxxed, right? That's the claim. Or deaths. Okay. I think it's both hospitalized and deaths. Anyway, so if that's true, why do people give a hoot if people are not vaxxed? They're clearly not affecting the vaxxed, right? Given the spectacular success rate of the vaccination, why do you care if the next guy is vaxxed or not? And don't tell me, oh, because they're taking up hospital space. So are motorcyclists who don't have helmets. So were folks who had men who had unprotected sex during the AIDS epidemic. So were cigarette smokers for a while. This is a new thing. You're taking up hospital space. So there is no threat to you who are vaccinated by the unvaccinated. You can't have it both ways. It's 99% effective, but you must get vaxxed. It's all about control. I told you that. That's how I began the hour. No, I actually began the hour about the Seattle city attorney race. But I want you to understand what this is about. You have the audacity to defy the left? We have a sheep as president.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Our friend Tom Tradup is one of the key executives at Salem Broadcasting, and whenever we are running an Alliance Defending Freedom fundraiser, as I do every October, because ADF comes back in full force whenever the Supreme Court is in town, ADF is here, and Alliance Defending Freedom has 75 lawyers on staff, and they work around the clock to protect your religious liberty, your free speech rights, and they're very, very good. They're the best legal defense firm in America, but they can't run on air. They need $100 donations, $250 donations, $1,000 donations. Please go over to HughHewitt.com and let the Alliance Defending Freedom, Defend Freedom banner load at the top, then click it and be generous, please. Or you can call 866-359-9644. Now, usually, Tom Tradup will send me what is known as an actual, some audio that I can use to illustrate what it is about Alliance Defending Freedom that you ought to be supporting. And there are so many great cases. He does a great job, but he's flat on his back. Tom hasn't been able to get up since Alabama lost to Texas A&M in the last seconds. I actually worry about him, and I've sent bulletins down. I've asked his wife to check on him. I think he's wandering the neighborhood in a bathrobe and a kangaroo. And he has a pet kangaroo. So I tell you, Tradup, on his behalf, please contribute to Alliance Defending Freedom. Try and break him out of his depression. Or, on the other hand, if you're one of the 99.9% of Americans who are glad that Alabama lost, make a contribution to Alliance Defending Freedom. And don't have a kangaroo. Make a donation to Alliance Defending Freedom. But for Tom's sake, if you are an Alabama fan, realize you got to get Mr. Crimson Tide back off of his back, out of his bathrobe, and back into the game. Giving me audio actuals for Alliance Defending Freedom. And I don't think you should be upset. They're just not that good this year. They're not Ohio State. C.J. Stroud's going to be the Big Ten Player of the Year, I think, and we'll just slice and dice them come playoff time. Although the SEC Mafia is trying to keep Ohio State out like they did 2 years ago because they know this is the year with Trevelyan Henderson and C.J. Stroud, Garrett Wilson, and Chris Olave. They don't want anything to do with the Buckeyes, so they're going to try and keep them out by hook or by crook. But it's still kind of stunning to lose to Texas A&M. Come on, I mean, really, Texas A&M. Alliance Defending Freedom needs your help. I digress. Let me go back to Friday's drama. As you may or may not recall, Mitch McConnell did a deal with Chuck Schumer to punt the debt limit to December. Mitch did this, I believe, because it sets up the Democrats for even more woeful news after they lose the Virginia election and Glenn Youngkin beats Terry McAuliffe. Republican Glenn Youngkin wins. But it was a handshake deal among gentlemen that they would move it back a month. No big concessions by either side, just postponing. Chuck Schumer then goes to the Senate floor and gives this speech, which I'm about to play for you, which so enrages his own member, Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin puts his hand in his hands as it happens, and he gets up and leaves. We'll hear about the reaction on the other side. Chuck Schumer is just kind of hysterical, so your full faith and credit in the United States should not falter because of Chuck Schumer sounding this way. But I want you to hear what it's like to have to be a Democrat in his caucus every day. You'd go crazy, too. Cut number 8.
Now, Mr. President, in a few moments, the Senate will pass an extension of the debt limit through early December, avoiding a first-ever Republican-manufactured default on the national debt. On Monday morning, I said we needed to pass a bill to address the debt limit by the end of the week, and that is exactly what we did. Republicans played a dangerous and risky partisan game, and I am glad that their brinksmanship did not work. For the good of America's families, for the good of our economy, Republicans must recognize in the future that they should approach fixing the debt limit in a bipartisan way. What is needed now is a long-term solution, so we don't go through this risky drama every few months. And we hope Republicans will join in enacting a long-term solution to the debt limit in December. We're ready to work with them. Leader McConnell and Senate Republicans insisted they wanted a solution to the debt ceiling, but said Democrats must raise it alone by going through a drawn-out, convoluted, and risky reconciliation process. That was simply unacceptable to my caucus. And yesterday, Senate Republicans finally realized that their obstruction was not going to work. I very much thank, my Democratic colleagues for showing our unity in solving this Republican-manufactured crisis. Despite immense opposition from Leader McConnell and members of his conference, our caucus held together, and we've pulled our country back from the cliff's edge that Republicans tried to push us over. This is a temporary but necessary and important fix. I appreciate that at the end of the day, we were able to raise the debt limit without a convoluted and unnecessary reconciliation process that until today, the Republican leader claimed was the only way to address the debt limit. Let me say that again. Today's vote is proof positive that the debt limit can be addressed without going through the reconciliation process, just as Democrats have been saying for months. The solution is for Republicans to either join us in raising the debt limit or stay out of the way and let Democrats address the debt limit ourselves. Those are the two choices, and it's very simple. Senate Democrats want a long-term solution to the debt limit to make sure financial remarks
Joe Manchin has gotten up and left. Because, see, they did a gentleman's agreement to postpone. There was no caving on either side. And this Joe Manchin was embarrassed by it, as were many Democrats. In fact, John Barrasso, the third-ranking Republican, was on Maria Bartiromo yesterday, said this, cut number 12, please.
You're absolutely right. It was a tantrum by Chuck Schumer, and he is known to be a bully. He loves to bully even his own caucus. And just looking at Joe Manchin, how disturbed he was by what happened. A number of Democrats came up to me, including calling me over the weekend to apologize for the terrible behavior of Chuck Schumer. We've made it clear. They want to use this process of reconciliation to pass their massive tax and spending bill. Well, they're going to have to use that process as well if they ever want to raise the debt ceiling again.
So what the Republican leader did, McConnell, is simply say, okay, we've been warning you for 4 months. Now the media is trying to persuade everyone that we sprung this on you. So we will give you another 4 weeks, maybe even 8 weeks to get this done via reconciliation, but we're not going to bail you out a second time. John Barrasso explained they have to fix this, cut number 11.
Well, that's actually the absolute bottom line of what we're looking at here. And in a way to try to lower the price tag, they're saying, well, we'll just start them small and let them grow over time. You and I know, Maria, once you get a federal government program in place, it's very hard for it to ever go away. So everything you mentioned is in there. The question is, how much are they going to start funding? But their goal is a complete takeover of the lives of the American people, which is why I call it big government socialism, and it is an expansion of government and an addiction to government like we have never even contemplated or seen before. And Joe Biden has surrendered to this socialist wing of the party, even to the point of holding hostage bridges, ports, airports, highways, things that the American people actually want.
Biden has surrendered, Schumer has surrendered, but did Mitch McConnell surrender to Chuck Schumer? Maria Bartiromo asked John Barrasso that specifically. Here is his answer, cut number 13.
What we're seeing here is an incredibly shrinking president of the United States who wants to blame everybody for everything instead of the man in the mirror. I'll tell you. He blamed the generals for Afghanistan. He blames our border patrol for the crisis at the border. He blames the general population for COVID. We have a president who is facing roaring flames all around him politically in terms of COVID, the border, inflation. And I'll tell you, people around this country are fed up, and people don't believe he is up to the job.
Yeah, people are fed up. I agree with that. We've got crises at every other corner, whether it be the inflation that's out of control, the jobs numbers were underwhelming, the crisis in Afghanistan, the crisis at the border. And yet Mitch McConnell agreed to join the Democrats in raising the debt ceiling, passing that bill in the Senate. Did Mitch McConnell cave?
No, not at all. We were able to force the Democrats to do two things they absolutely did not want to do. One is, as you know, they wanted a blank check. They wanted to be able to raise the debt ceiling all the way through the 2022 elections to spend as much as they want. That undermines the accountability that they owe the American people, that all of us owe the American people. So, number one, they did not get a blank check. We made them fill in a number, and it's the first time that's happened in over a decade. And Maria, the number that they filled in was a small number compared to the amount that they're asking for in this $5 trillion big government socialism bill. So I think actually it's going to make it a lot harder for them to pass this reckless tax and spending bill.
So Mitch McConnell has a plan. Trust in Mitch. All right, just trust in Mitch. If you want to understand what the effects of all this spending are, and you're anywhere near Atlanta on Wednesday night, first time I've been back on the road since the virus. I'm going out with my friend Brian Westbury, the best economist in America, also the most entertaining explainer of what's ahead in markets and how to invest. I think if you have any investment amount of money at all, you want to come and listen to Brian explain what's happening in markets, go to am920theanswer.com. Alfredo Ortiz, who you hear on this show often from Job Creators Network, will be along with us. He's helping sponsor the event in Atlanta, talking about small business owners out there. And then, of course, the star of the evening, Herschel Walker. So if you want to meet Herschel, you want to hear Brian, you want to hear Alfredo, you want to hear me talk, come on Wednesday night to Atlanta's History Center. Tickets are available only at am920theanswer.com, am920theanswer.com. If you're driving around stuck in traffic in Atlanta right now, do consider coming out and joining us on Wednesday night, because I'd love for Herschel to get a good sense of where the people of Georgia are. That is Wednesday night. It's upon us. am920theanswer.com. This is relieffactor.com. Got to get my miles in today, tomorrow, and Wednesday, because I'm traveling Thursday and Friday. Here it is. I carry in Kirkman, Resveratrol Omega. All I want to do is lukewarm coffee. Despite the fact I have my Kasori, I did not have my electrician come by, and the studio is held together with baling wire, and you wouldn't believe the stuff in here. It's Sparky. We call Dwayne Sparky. I'm afraid to plug that in, so my coffee is still lukewarm, Beth, if you're listening. I am, however, quite certain, if you're listening, you've heard me talk about relieffactor.com. Friday 7, Saturday 8, Sunday 5. Why? Well, yeah, I might be a few years older than when I began this show, but I'm doing more miles than I ever have had before. Maybe a little bit slower. The reason is very simple. relieffactor.com. I've been taking it for 10 years. I encourage you to start taking it immediately. Head over to relieffactor.com. $19.95 gets you started. There is no substitute for feeling great as you get older and as you stay in shape. Let me also appeal to you, please. Alliance Defending Freedom. I told you earlier, I have no audio today because Tom Tradup, an Alabama fan, is wandering the streets of Dallas in a bathrobe with a kangaroo asking why, because Alabama got upset this weekend. Well, even though he's distressed, Alliance Defending Freedom still needs your help. Head over to HughHewitt.com. Let the banner load at the top. Let's get over $100,000 for Alliance Defending Freedom. Let's dig deep. Let's make sure that they can be in every. This is the year. This is the Dobbs case. This is the Roe v. Wade year. This is the year to support Alliance Defending Freedom at HughHewitt.com or call 866-359-9644. 866-359-9644.
Now.
The public would be outraged if they knew the truth.
Why do you think our politicians are not on the sidewalk right now talking to you?
No have no respect.
The old wall randomly turns into a guardrail, followed by miles of open border.
Human trafficking gone.
That journey is extremely dangerous.
The 7-year-old girl died in the desert.
From the country of India.
A great pillar of the community was killed by a man who had been deported at least twice.
This little urn contains the ashes of my son. His dreams cut short forever.
We're so worried about other countries' problems, and we don't even focus on our own.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
Obviously, you won't necessarily know the answer to this question per se, but what is the deal with Republicans? Because I'm sitting here thinking, what can be done? I mean, these people are essentially, in my mind, political prisoners, excuse me, and I don't understand why Republicans, when they have an opportunity to call out injustice and to get on the offense, it's just this is just weird to me. I don't understand if Republicans, the leadership, if they're intimidated, if they don't want to go up against a black man, or if they're scared of being branded racist. I don't understand this. Besides the fact that, okay, they don't necessarily like Trump, we're all realizing that. But for the sake of the integrity of our Justice Department, you would think that more Republicans would stand up.
Republicans gave Lisa Monaco, the deputy AG who's in charge, an Obama loyalist, a Russian collusion perp, a anti-Trumpist who was on CNN for 4 years. They gave her almost a unanimous confirmation, Carl. 48 Republican senators voted to put Lisa Monaco, a well-known Obama loyalist, in charge of the Justice Department. 20 Republicans voted to put Merrick Garland in charge of the Justice Department. They didn't even put up a minimal fight when Biden presented those two. And so now they're up. Yeah. So, I mean, they're cowards. They're complicit. You go down the list. I don't know. But the real battle next year, Carl, is going to be in the Republican Party, not the Democrats. We need to clean house almost entirely. These are not the people
the final word.
who can lead us against the fight.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
If you're not vaccinated, you should be in one of those little ice huts out in the middle of a lake at Lake Winnetonka in the middle of Minnesota in the freezing cold. You should sit out there for all of the winter. Just sit in that little booth. That's how you should spend Christmas.
And at rumble.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
The Democratic Party somehow has convinced black people that they're the good guys.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway. Over the course of my life, I've attended dozens and dozens of school board meetings for a variety of reasons. I had a couple of buddies who were on school boards that were under fire. I have been on an advisory council to a school board. I was on a grant-making institution that often made grants to school boards. And they're often lively. They've never, ever been the attention of anyone like Salena Zito. They are now. Salena Zito, of course, columnist for the Washington Examiner and the New York Post, has got the Pittsburgh School Board in her eye, and Dr. Paul Carson showing up at it. Good morning, Salena.
Good morning. How are you today?
Always great. I think it's wonderful you are writing about school boards. Tell us what the column is and why it was on your mind.
Well, last week there was some scuttlebutt about the Department of Justice being pressured by, and now I'm going to forget the acronym, the alphabet soup of school boards, that people that attend them were getting out of hand, and so that the DOJ should be, and they're trying to walk this back now and say they didn't want this. However, they did say it, that they wanted people that attended school boards that, you know, were too lively, got out of hand, and were threatening, would be deemed domestic terrorists and treated as such. And this kind of backfired.
Oh, big time! Because all of a sudden, people see the Attorney General of the United States saying that Mom and Pa Kettle are upset with critical race theory or domestic terrorists because they're upset at the local school board.
Yeah, you know, I mean, school board meetings. I have gone with my mother as a teenager. I have gone as a parent. I've had to cover them. I've told young reporters it's the first place you want to learn about the American, you know, sort of conversation about what's important in their lives is to cover a school board because they were the most intense. But, you know, you're talking about your child and or traditionally at a school board meeting, it's either about, you know, something that impacts your child, which, by the way, schools have your child more than you do after a certain age, and or the taxes. And how, you know, is this going to impact where I live? And also school districts are places that draw people to live in the community and or cause people to flee a community if they're not doing well. So schools are these school board meetings are incredibly important.
And they can be heated, by the way. I have been at so many heated school board members, and sometimes it's because the cheerleaders aren't getting enough of the budget. Other times it's because the theater hasn't been finished. Another time it's because a teacher has been moved or a principal fired. More often than not, it's because a mill has been, a levy has been put on the local ballot trying to get 2/3. And I led one of those once. School boards are feisty. They have never not been feisty.
They have always been feisty. And that's a good thing. These are very important entities in our lives, and school boards have been around since the 17th century. I mean, they have been around. They began in Massachusetts, and they've been part of our conversation and part of making our communities better for as long, but since before we even exist as a nation.
So why did Dr. Carson finally go down to the Pittsburgh school board? What motivated him to finally? He had never gone to a school board meeting before.
Right. Well, there are numerous things that are going wrong. By the way, he's from Cleveland, so
well, good. He has good sense.
Yeah, I think he wore a brown shirt to one.
We got hosed last night. Joe Thomas says we got hosed. We got hosed, but I digress.
So, you know, there's a lot of people out there that are deeply concerned about, you know, what happens to you in today's culture. You know, and so this thing with the DOJ even made it worse because, you know, you worry about, and Carson was worried about his reputation. He was worried about how it's going to be used against him. And there was nothing inflammatory that he wanted to say. We've had so many problems here in Western Pennsylvania, in Pittsburgh, with our school, the City of Pittsburgh School District, from it being closed for over a year, no school buses for the children. We've had a problem with the superintendent who was eventually forced to resign. And so, you know, there have been a number of problems with the Pittsburgh City Schools. Again, this is normal. But, you know, at first he was very hesitant because he was unsure of, you know, how, you know, is this going to be used as a weapon? Is someone going to sort of, you know, video me if I have something to say and use it against him?
And cancel.
Right.
Well, I'm glad he went anyway. It's amazing to me that school boards across the United States have been shuttered for a year and now they don't have enough buses. What do you think they were planning for a year? Did they not plan to reopen ever? I'm astonished.
It is stunning, the incompetence.
Incompetence. It's institutionalized incompetence at school districts across America. That's why Glenn Youngkin's going to be the next governor of Virginia. Stay tuned, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Thank you, Salena Zito. Everything about Salena is at salenazito.com.
Now.
The Democratic Party somehow has convinced black people that they're the good guys. Never mind the skanky history of the Democratic Party. That was a party of slavery.
He said, listen, I gotta give these niggas enough. Not too much, but enough that I'll have them voting Democrat for the next 200 years.
The race grievance industry would have you believe that blacks get up and think about nothing else except race.
If I tell you this is racist, yeah, I would get you emotional.
There is a whole big cottage industry for racism. If racism went away, a lot of people would be unemployed.
The mob during the Minneapolis riots following the death of George Floyd. A bunch of white thugs, frankly, burning down the city's traditional black and Asian business district.
They're racist, 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 racist. Everything's racist.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
The last 3 years of the Bush administration, I was the assistant U.S. trade rep for the Bush administration for public affairs, meaning I was just the spokesperson. And forever, we would hear why we couldn't do things. We couldn't renegotiate NAFTA because, well, it was signed and sealed and we couldn't do this. And I get it, but that was the mentality.
Yes.
And frankly, that's the mentality that permeates government. And I get it. And so I was always like, okay, I get it. This is stupid, but we do have a signed deal. And you got a guy like Trump that comes in and you tell him, well, you know, there's this signed deal. And he says, so what? And
it was one of the most refreshing things about it.
And it was just, the thing that was so weird is if you think about it, why aren't more, because I don't think you should tear up everything for the sake of it.
No, but just ask the questions.
Right, ask the questions. Why do we just keep doing things the way that we always have? Why don't we challenge the system? Can it do better? Can we do better for the American people? Can we be more efficient and a better steward of their tax dollars? Can we deliver a better product? Do we still need to do what we're doing anymore? Yeah. Right? I mean, think about this. Trump's view was, you haven't modernized an agreement. When NAFTA was signed, there was no internet. So we're dealing with problems that didn't exist then that, frankly, when you signed the deal, you couldn't have even thought of. So why not modernize it? On behalf of America, that's what we're supposed to be doing. And at the end of the day, it all worked out. And if you are in the car industry, you're getting a better deal now as an American worker in that industry. If you're a dairy farmer, you're getting a better deal. If you work in the technology field, your IP is more protected. But it was a way of thinking that had never come in before, because previously you would have had some guy that would have been like, okay, here's 18 PowerPoints and, you know, this is the process. And Trump was like, no, that's not it. If it's not working, screw it.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
It's like a ripple throughout society. We've got Dr. Fauci hectoring everybody who's had COVID who didn't get a vaccination, even though they have immunity. But I'm talking about not the people who refuse to be vaxxed, but the people who've had it and yet we have 2 million people scheduled to come across the border in the fiscal year, and he's absolutely silent about it.
That's right.
He can't even utter the word.
Well, it's like the silence of the unmasked demonstrators. The medical profession said that's fine because it's
all 1,200 of them. I remember that well.
That's right.
And it's so what we're doing is we're creating not just exemptions for illegal aliens, but we're elevating them in some sense. We're not asking them to follow the law. We're not asking
right.
them to
So I want to know
vaccinated.
the original sin here. Is the original sin Ted Kennedy? Is the original sin the inability of the World War II generation to pass on American values? What's the original sin?
I think it's two things. It was the affluence and the leisure created by the 6%, just enormous affluence that was created, 6% a year GDP in the 50s and 60s, and we created the most leisured and affluent society, and it created certain expectations about human nature that create a guy like Ted Kennedy. and create his idea that we're so wealthy, we're so powerful, we're so liberal, we're so wonderful that we're going to extend this and feel so good about ourselves and start deliberately having a policy where we don't apply the old rules of assimilation, integration, or border enforcement.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
The most powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized.
We are now all rooting for his success.
That's not what happened. It was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
What the left tries to do is they just use emotion. They try to make you so mad that you stop thinking. And you end up, you wind up just literally foregoing your liberties, your civil liberties, because you're mad at somebody. And the left just reels you in. Oh, this person is racist. Oh, this person is homophobic. Oh, this person is xenophobic, and all this kind of stuff. It's constantly, it's this constant divisiveness. It's this constant state of anger just to keep you mad. And then you're so busy being mad. You're so busy hating your neighbor that you're not thinking, oh, wait a minute. Inflation is skyrocketing? You mean I won't be able to afford groceries? I'm already struggling, but I won't be able to afford groceries. I won't be able to afford to put gas in my car. See, the big issues they want you to stop thinking about. They just want you to hate Republicans. They want you to hate black conservatives. They want you to hate white conservatives. Meanwhile, they're hating on you. It's amazing to me how the left gets away with this stuff. And it's amazing to me how so many people continuously fall for it. You notice every election cycle, the left will blow up, the media will blow up a story about a black man or whatever. Maybe it's an issue with cops or whatever it may be. But you have to understand something. And I'm not saying these stories like George Floyd and all this kind of stuff shouldn't be brought to light. But you have to understand the reason why they're brought to light isn't because they happen all the time. Because police have millions of stops and deal with, they have millions of confrontations with criminals and none every single year. So when something like a George Floyd incident makes it onto the news, it's not because it's normative, it's because it's extremely rare. But the left makes you too mad to realize this.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Salem Now.
His most amazing discovery.
¿Cuánto queda?
No queda nada. Que lo siento mucho.
And that's the only time you can come to Christ, when the Spirit of God calls you to the cross. Don't you hesitate.
Have you ever thought of going to seminary?
Madre, padre, ¿quién está listo para ser transformado por el poder de su palabra?
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway. Reminding everyone in Atlanta, I will be in Atlanta on Wednesday night with Herschel Walker. at the Atlanta History Center. I'll also be joined by Brian Westbury, who is my regular guest, the economist from Chicago, who you frequently see on CNBC, talking about the Biden stagflation that is upon us. What a horrible jobs number. On Friday, after my show was off the air, out came the jobs number, maybe the worst job number. I'll play that for you in just a second. I'm waiting for Jake Sherman of Punchbowl News. Maybe Jake has been interrupted by a breaking news story. I never know. He's usually as reliable as a clock. And I've already read, you know what I'll bet this is? I'll bet that they wrote the Punchbowl News. It's a holiday, of course, for the federal government. And I'll bet you they wrote this last night. Maybe not. Maybe that's Jake right now. I was going about to slander Jake Sherman. Jake, it's you. I was about to slander you and say, I'll bet you they wrote Punchbowl News last night and took the day off because the feds were off. Welcome back, buddy.
No, we are not off. My phone was on silent. I apologize to you.
Not a problem. Jake Sherman of Punchbowl News. Get your Punchbowl News at punchbowlnews.com. Jake, last hour I played Chuck Schumer's speech. You wrote your assessment of the Biden legislative agenda. Did you take into account the impact of the Schumer speech, which Barrasso told Maria Bartiromo yesterday has deeply soured the Republican caucus? I mean, to the point they don't want to talk to the guy.
Yeah, listen, I actually don't. I mean, they didn't talk much to him anyway, so I don't find that to be I don't find it to be dispositive. I've been through a lot of cycles where speeches were supposed to ruin relationships. The fact is, the reality is there's not much cooperation that we anticipate anyway. I think the conventional wisdom is wrong on the Democratic side. I think that because McConnell blinked in this last debt limit fight, it makes it less likely he'll blink again. And I think that I don't think the speech is what did it. It's not like we were in a golden era for cooperation.
What did you make of Joe Manchin face in his hands and then leaving?
Well, we reported at the time that he used an expletive and said it was
I read that.
Or so.
Yes.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what it was. I think I'm the cynic here, as you know, Hugh. I think that being against Schumer is beneficial for Joe Manchin, but I do think Joe Manchin owns Chuck Schumer in a way, in the sense that he can't get anything done, Schumer can't, without Joe Manchin. So, and what Manchin said in many respects was right, that if you want to have more progressive agenda and you don't want to have to worry about Joe Manchin, you should elect more progressives to the Senate, and I think that's the reality of it.
Now, can I explain to you my theory of what happened last week? I think Mitch McConnell won, even though people think he lost. I think he intended people to think he lost so that he could win in December. He could not allow the debt crisis right now. So he waited and waited and waited, extended it till December, and he will allow it in December. He couldn't allow it now because it might have assisted the reconciliation in going to a higher number. Now the Democrats have to work out their reconciliation, and if they do, they're going to have passed trillions of dollars in spending, and they're going to have to borrow for it through reconciliation to get it. Your take, Jake Sherman.
I don't think that, listen, I think that he... I don't think that he won or lost. I think this was kind of a stupid fight and it was a stupid deal that really screws over everyone involved. I mean, I agree with you. He could not afford to have a default, and he did. I guess I would say he won because Schumer's main argument against reconciliation and lifting the debt ceiling and reconciliation was that he didn't have time. That was Schumer's main argument.
Yep.
Now, he can't make that argument. So,
yep.
And I hear that. I do hear that. There's a lot of anger in the Republican conference, though. I mean, we can't underestimate that on what McConnell did. There's no movement to get rid of him. That silliness that is coming from wherever Trump. I don't know where he's getting that from.
Oh, you mean getting rid of McConnell? Not a chance.
Yeah,
not a chance. The best legislative leader the Republicans have had in my lifetime. That includes Bob Dole, for whom I have enormous respect.
Yes. So, listen, win, loss, I don't think anyone really won or anyone really lost here. I mean, it's not like McConnell gave something up. He didn't give anything up here.
And they did not get their act together. I was afraid the one thing he might have forced was a deal on the reconciliation top line so that the Democrats could get their act together and pass a reconciliation amendment. Now they're just going to fight among themselves. And we're going to see a replay of this in December, Jake, right? We're going to see the same thing.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that we're going to see. I mean, listen, there's a lot of, and we, as you noted this morning. I mean, it's not as if they're close. I mean, there's just a lot between now and then when it comes to reconciliation and everything like that. There's just a lot that needs to get done, and then there's government funding. So there's just, yes, we are entering a frenzied period. I don't think McConnell could have forced a deal on a top line number. I just don't think that would have been possible.
Now, at the beginning of the year, Joe Biden's full agenda was a $9 trillion spending package, of which he's already banked $2. Then he wanted $7, 2 more in infrastructure and 5 in Build Back Better. He's down to a maximum total of 4.5, so he's going to get maybe half of his agenda. In Punchbowl News today, this really bothers me. They're fixated on FDR. They don't seem, I took FDR history from Frank Friedel. I actually know a little bit about FDR. This has got nothing to do with FDR. FDR has programs like Civilian Conservation Corps, like the Public Works Progress Administration, like the National Artists Act. There are all sorts of different things that he did. They've done nothing like that. And FDR didn't even work, and if he'd ended after 2 terms, he would have been a failure because the recession came back in 1938. It was World War II that made FDR a genius. What does Biden not understand about FDR?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think they're trying to talk about just big programs and big priorities and getting big things done. I hear you on the specifics. But I mean, listen, if they are, I would say just from a top level point of view, if they are able to get all of this done, that is impressive at a 50-50 Senate. I mean, what will it do to them politically? I don't know the answer to that, and the only time will tell is how the clock ticks, I guess you could say. But I hear you on that. I don't think they're talking about necessarily the specifics. I think it's shorthand for just getting big things done.
All they are doing is spending money. FDR didn't spend enough, and we stayed in a depression, and then they had a recession in 1938 after the recovery began. Here we're going to get stagflation, and those job numbers, Jake, on Friday. Wow. What did you hear about those on the Hill? Because that was a bucket of cold water in everybody's face.
Yeah, listen, the Democrats say they need to keep that. This means they need to get the agenda done, which is an interesting take and not a take that I think you would share with them.
No.
But it is listen, it has people nervous, right? I mean, we're seeing a lot of the same signals that we saw of back in 2010 and 2009. And I mean, I'm looking at the redistricting stuff and the Dave Wassermans and all those folks who are really looking at the maps. And I mean, listen, you just see a climate brewing that Republicans could win 15 to 20 seats. I mean, that's what I think a lot of people think right now. We don't know. We're a long way away. And job numbers like this, although, listen, there's some details. There's more than meets the eye. But I mean, job numbers like this is not what you want to see if you're a Democrat.
I think Democrats would take a 15-loss seat right now. I think they would take a loss of 15 and hope to get back. I'm more interested in Virginia. Let's finish there. Terry McAuliffe had a terrible week at the debate, at the round table with Dana Bash yesterday. I think Glenn Youngkin has got the wind at his back. What do you think?
Well, I mean, he definitely has the wind at his back in the sense that yes, he does have the wind at his back in a sense. Terry McAuliffe keeps talking about how Congress has not passed a reconciliation bill, an infrastructure bill, and he's bashing Congress. I mean, that's an easy thing to bash. But yeah, listen, I think if Republicans win in Virginia, people are going to see that as another signal when it comes to the 2022 electoral prospects.
What's your over-under on Princess Blanding, the third-party progressive African-American candidate in Virginia? What percent?
No, I have no idea. I really have no idea. I'm going to stick to Congress.
I think I think it's 3%, and I think that spells doom for Terry McAuliffe. Jake Sherman, always a pleasure. Punchbowl News, very interesting this morning, as it is every morning, America. Go over to punchbowlnews.com and subscribe. I almost slandered Jake. I did not slander Jake, though. He was indeed. Jake Awake is always a deal on Monday morning. I thought maybe because the federal government is off today that maybe Jake was kind of mailing it in last night. But no! Live here inside the Beltway, Jake Sherman, the Punchbowl News. I'll be right back. 1-800-520-1234. This book, Risk, by General Stanley McChrystal will be the subject next hour. Don't forget, Alliance Defending Freedom. There's a banner over at the top of HughHewitt.com. Please go and be as generous as you can be. We need ADF in the trenches. We need ADF in the courtrooms. We need ADF at the Supreme Court, and we need them this year more than ever. Contribute what you can at HughHewitt.com. The banner will come up at the very top, then come right back for the next segment. My number is 1-800-520-1234. I'm Hugh Hewitt.
This most amazing discoveries thought to be written in a lost journal. Now, in the right hands, it could revolutionize the 21st century, but in the wrong hands, kill him.
If you can stop an earthquake, doesn't that mean you could start one too?
That's why that notebook should never fall into the wrong hands.
There's an old brown battered notebook in my office at work. You have to find it, take it, and keep it hidden at all costs. The G20 leaders meeting downtown, they're in danger. In fact, the whole of downtown could be in danger.
If we are to build the superhuman, we must first eliminate those who are flawed.
People are created equally. All of downtown, the high-rises were built on rollers to withstand horizontal shakes. A vertical quake this size could collapse half of downtown.
We have commenced the countdown.
Shall we stop this thing?
Save the universe!
Powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized to go after perceived domestic enemies. And that's very scary.
Our constitutional democracy enshrines the peaceful transfer of power.
We are now all rooting for his success. The peaceful transition of power is one of the hallmarks of our democracy.
We don't live in the United States of America as is any of us would like to understand it.
We have a peaceful transition of power process. That's not what happened.
They interviewed General Flynn, and they did it in what was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
This is what third world security states do. They spy on their political opponents like this.
This is part of a concerted Russian influence operation.
Russian interference. They colluded. They were in on it.
He would constantly say, I have seen evidence of collusion.
Until this is released, I can't comment. I can't go into the particulars.
Russians, I'm not going to be specific.
But he knew he could just say it on TV and then hide behind, well, it's all classified, I can't get into it.
Well, it's classified. You can't see it. Collusion. You just got to be willing to see it.
New York's Daily News ran this front page, Trump is Hitler.
How could 62 million Americans vote for Hitler? Are 62 million Americans Nazis?
We really almost thought it was a joke. Like, really, you're not going to accept that you lost this election?
Then they see the Russia collusion narrative sitting right there in front of them and say, why don't we just say that he cheated?
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence. It's given people who are bad faith actors a license to do whatever they want because they literally feel like they're fighting Russian spies and Nazis.
Russiagate has been the most egregious abuse of everything that was supposed to have been good about our government.
The thing that they were investigating the Trump campaign for is what they themselves were doing.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Sadly, the rocket that was supposed to take William Shatner to space has been delayed. Now, I last talked about William Shatner last week when Generalissimo told me he and Shatner were together at the Pedigo gathering in Huntington Beach. Did he come on a Pedigo, by the way, Generalissimo?
I do not believe so, because I don't think he really lives that close to Huntington Beach.
Did he have a phaser with him?
He did not have a phaser with him. He did not have his Admiral Starfleet uniform. He did have a briefcase, and he opened up the briefcase, and he pulled out his cell phone out of his briefcase, and I think he was checking his email to make sure the appearance fee check cleared.
All right, just check. Well, William Shatner is, if you go to the Telegraph, there's a picture of him.
Very
he looks
well
great.
preserved for a 90-year-old guy.
90-year-old astronaut going up in Blue Origin. My hat is off to him. My hat is off to him. Let me tell you about another trip. This one not on a Blue Origin spaceship, but the Job Creators Network bus tour. Now, if you go to jcnbustour.com, you can find out where it is. Job Creator Network, jcnbustour.com, you can find out where it is. On Wednesday, and it's in Atlanta, because that's where I'm going to be with Herschel Walker and Alfredo Ortiz and Brian Westbury. Now, Westbury is the best economist in America. You see him on CNBC. Alfredo is running around on the Job Creator Network bus tour at jcnbustour.com, and Herschel is Herschel. And we're all getting together in Atlanta on Wednesday, but it's a ticketed event. You just can't drop by to see the second greatest running back of all time. Not Jimmy Brown, but he's close. If he'd been to Ohio State, he might have been as good as Jimmy Brown, but Jimmy Brown went to Syracuse, of course, but then he went and redeemed himself by going to Cleveland. Herschel on Wednesday night at the Atlanta History Center, plus Alfredo Ortiz, no William Shatner, but Brian Westbury. That's like the four astronauts who are going up in Blue Origin, but that's am920theanswer.com if you want to come out on Wednesday night. That's where you go and get the ticket. Maybe you read this weekend, I read this book, Risk, by Stanley McChrystal. He's joining me. General McChrystal is joining me next hour, at the bottom of the hour, for an extended conversation about risk. It's a fascinating book. Maybe you read Enemy at the Gates this weekend, the Vince Flynn novel. The Mitch Raff thriller is back by our friend Kyle Mills. That would have been well time invested. Mitch Rapp has a very high tolerance for risk. General McChrystal talks about risk in everybody's lives in the book that we will be discussing next hour. I don't want you to miss that, because there's only one McChrystal, and he's really, really on top of his game. Anthony Fauci was back yesterday. A week ago, wasn't certain about Christmas, but here's what he told Dana Bash about Halloween, cut 20.
Halloween is just around the corner. A lot of parents are wondering how to trick or treat. Do they hand out candy? Do they walk around with their children? What's your guidance?
I think that particularly if you're vaccinated, but you can get out there, you're outdoors for the most part, at least when my children were out there doing trick-or-treating, and enjoy it. I mean, this is a time that children love. It's a very important part of the year for children. I know my children enjoyed it. So, I mean, again, particularly if you're vaccinated. If you're not vaccinated, again, think about it, that you'll add an extra degree of protection to yourself and your children and your family and your community. So it's a good time to reflect on why it's important to get vaccinated, but go out there and enjoy Halloween as well as the other holidays that will be coming up.
So that's kind of a different tone from Anthony Fauci after he canceled Christmas.
Isn't it, though?
All of a sudden, but he still has to say, but not if you're not vaccinated. Now, here's the deal. I am vaccinated. I have my booster. I'm going to be with my grandkids on Halloween if I have to drive 4 hours to do it. And I'm going to have fun. And I hope everyone gets vaccinated. Really, does Dr. Fauci have any idea what he's talking about here? Why can he not say, that call isn't really what I'm here to talk to you about, Dana. The vaccine is safe. Now, that's all you have to do. The guy cannot stay on message. Everybody wants him to opine on everything, but we're way past the sell-by date on advice from Dr. Fauci on holidays after last week. Just ask him about the booster. Ask him about, for example, whether or not they are going to clarify the guidance on boosters, which is quite the controversy in the literature, because most scientists think anyone who wants one should get one. But that equity issues are holding back the FDA panel. And you might ask him, Why is the FDA advisory panel waiting 3 weeks to consider the evidence on childhood vaccines? I mean, if it's an emergency. Come right back. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Simon & Schuster's Enemy at the Gates, the latest in the Vince Flynn series by Kyle Mills.
Now. The public would be outraged if they knew the truth.
Why do you think our politicians are not on the sidewalk right now talking to you?
Don't have no respect.
The old wall randomly turns into a guardrail, followed by miles of open border.
Human trafficking gone.
That journey is extremely dangerous.
The 7-year-old girl died in the desert.
From the country of India.
A great pillar of the community was killed by a man who had been deported at least twice.
This little urn contains the ashes of my son. His dreams cut short forever.
We're so worried about other countries' problems, and we don't even focus on our own.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store, or go to Salem Now.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
The powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized.
We are now all rooting for his success.
That's not what happened.
It was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
This is what third world security states do. They spy on their political opponents like this.
This is part of a concerted Russian influence operation.
Russians, I'm not going to be specific as
He knew he could just say it on TV and then hide behind, well, it's all classified, I can't get into it.
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence. It's given people who are bad faith actors a license to do whatever they want.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store, or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
I have never seen in my life the orchestrated hatred to a group of Americans as I am seeing now. It's orchestrated hatred. You are allowed to hate the unvaccinated, even if the unvaccinated had COVID already. And there is no scientific reason whatsoever for them to take as minimal a risk as it is the vaccine. You are to hate these people. They are killers. They are killing you and themselves. This is this piece of crap governor of California on television.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Larry Elder Show.
I really do think it's time to revolt. And I'm not talking about go crazy. I'm not talking about, grab your arms and get out in the street and go crazy. I just think it's time to stop listening to these guys. We know what they're up to. These guys are post-constitutional. They're circumventing your power. They're gaining power for themselves or accumulating power for themselves. That's all they want to do. And it's up to us to just resist. It's up to us, as a matter of fact, when it comes to Christmas, I'm looking forward to inviting more people over. I'm trying to think of who else I can throw on the list. I'm like, forget Fauci. Forget him.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
This is Carol Platt Liebau for townhall.com. It's not surprising that Joe Biden wants to turn the page on his incompetent withdrawal from Afghanistan and the abandonment of U.S. citizens and our allies there. Almost as unsurprising as the media's craven effort to help him. Even as Americans remain hostage in Afghanistan and the Taliban flaunts the military equipment we left them, the news has shifted to other domestic stories. It's inexplicable. Their silence is a scandal. But sadly, we've grown used to seeing the media try to influence public opinion in a way that benefits their chosen candidates. Let's hope that this time, Americans see through the manipulation. So long as America is being humiliated by a group of Taliban savages and our fellow citizens are captives, we deserve the full story. We should demand that the media give it to us. I'm Carol Platt Liebau.
The Pepperdine Graduate School of Public Policy, for those considering careers in politics and policy. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
So Joe Biden thinks that an illegal chasing a U.S. senator into a ladies' room is part of the process and happens to everybody. Wow.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway on this Monday morning, joined by Secretary Elaine Chao, formerly Secretary of Transportation, Secretary of Labor, also CEO of the United Way, former Director of the Peace Corps. Basically, she's done everything, including going out with other fellow former cabinet members to honor the late George Shultz. That was quite a gathering of national security superstars. Secretary Chao, welcome. Good morning. Tell us about it.
Oh, good morning. It was actually very inspiring. We had all the previous living Secretary of State in attendance, and each gave a wonderful, moving, touching eulogy about the effects and impact that Secretary Shultz had on the United States in keeping us safe and taking a long-term point of view. Current Secretary of Transportation Anthony Blinken was there as well. I got to know Secretary Shultz because I have relatives living out in California. So I would go out there during the Christmas break, and every time he heard that I was there, he would invite me to lunch. And it was invariably at his house on the Stanfur campus, and he was thinking about some big issue that was impacting our country. He prodded policymakers to think beyond the usual, to think about the future, and I think all will say that he was very instrumental in kind of keeping focus on the big issues. Interestingly enough, I heard from Karen Tumulty, who wrote a recent biography called The Triumph of Nancy Reagan. And in that book, Karen Tumulty mentions that Nancy Reagan engineered a private upstairs in the residence dinner with Secretary Shultz and his wife because then President Ronald Reagan was concerned about the Cold War, was interested in knowing some of his opposing with some of the other leaders who he would not have had a chance to speak with. And that became the beginning of a series of dialogue discussions about negotiations at Reykjavik.
George Shultz is the most amazing fellow. 10 years ago, when he was only in his 90s, he dedicated the law school, which I speak, the Fowler School of Law, where I teach at Chapman in Orange County. And he gave a stand-up address without notes that went for about an hour, and everyone was stunned. But every time I've met him, he's always just introduced himself as George Shultz, United States Marine. I like that about him as well. But what a great American, what a great gathering of people. I'm glad you were there to represent the McConnell Chao family. Yeah. Secretary Chao, I want to talk to you.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Henry Kissinger was there, and Kanji Rice, and Jim Baker, and General Mattis, Senator Nunn. It was really quite a promenade of prominent Americans who have played such important roles in our country.
People don't know that George Shultz is actually also responsible in large part for the desegregation of Southern schools, which happened under Richard Nixon, also not very well known. Shultz is the man. We have him on tape at the Nixon Library getting that done. George Shultz, before OMB, before everything else, he was charged with and successfully executed the strategy of desegregating Southern schools. Secretary Chao, I'm glad you were available today because there are two headlines. One from the Wall Street Journal. Biggest U.S. retailers charter private cargo ships to sail around port delays. Then in the New York Times, it's not sustainable. What America's port crisis looks like up close. There aren't enough workers. There aren't enough ships. You've been the Secretary of Labor and the Secretary of Transportation. What do we do?
Well, I think this is a very dire situation. You know, when COVID initially hit our shores early in 2020, I was then Secretary of Transportation, and we quickly focused on keeping the transportation supply chains open, you know, in our country, so that essential medical supplies, groceries, and other essentials were available. And that effort actually required some pretty strong measures. Number one, we decided to ease some restrictions on truckers so that they can keep goods moving. We made sure that the national airspace kept airplanes flying because even though at one point planes were nearly empty of passengers, commercial airliners also routinely transport a lot of goods, especially medical supplies. You know, remember those early days of the initial lockdowns? We had hoarding of toilet paper, sandy wipes, shortage of masks. Stores were putting limits on how much customers can buy of one item. And more than 70% of domestic freight moves via trucks. But today's supply chain problems extend all the way from foreign ports, where worker shortages and COVID lockdowns have slowed the loading of cargo ships from where they started to U.S. ports, primarily the West Coast ports, where, as you've just mentioned, the other day there were over 60 tankers, freighters, container ships, with tens of thousands of storage containers offshore waiting for an opportunity to unload.
Oh, for Saturday mornings, for as long as I've been on the radio, I have trundled along Huntington Beach from Newport Beach 60th Street to the pier. I have never seen lines of cargo ships like now. Now, they also have an oil spill to deal with, but and it may be related to those tankers maybe putting an anchor down on one of the pipelines. We don't know for sure yet. But the line of ships, it's astonishing.
It is astonishing. And the shipping industry, the trucking industry, ports, railroads, they're all experiencing worker shortages. Shipping across the Pacific Ocean is taking twice as long now as before COVID, about 80 days. And the cost of moving these storage containers have tripled or more. And as you mentioned, now it's gotten so bad that some big retailers are renting entire cargo ships. And that's leaving smaller businesses who can't afford to rent entire cargo ships at a further competitive disadvantage.
So
Mm-hmm.
I'm in favor of the infrastructure bill because it does have a few $1 billion for ports, which are badly needed. But what do you think ought to be done regulatory or legally to help assist in the unclogging of what is basically a broken supply chain and a labor shortage?
I think we have to have the government stop competing with the private sector in terms of compensating workers. A shortage of labor is causing a shortage of warehouse spaces even. I mean, there are not enough workers who are able to work at just moving items, in moving things in warehouse spaces. Roughly 98% of warehouses in Southern California's Inland Empire region are full. And the entire western United States has a mere 3.6% vacancy rate.
Wow.
Overall container volumes at the Port of Los Angeles have increased 30% this year. Meanwhile, trucking capacity has only increased 8%. And they need about 25% more, warehouse spaces. So this is adding up that a supply chain with a lot of moving parts, as you mentioned, is not moving as quickly as we need it to.
So
and
the number one,
it's going to have a
agenda
impact on Christmas too.
Oh, we're not canceling Christmas. We're not going Dr. Fauci here. But I know that the Journal says the reason these retailers have chartered entire ships is that they do not want to have empty shelves at Christmas. The number one problem then is unemployment compensation extended beyond the period of necessity. Is that it?
Well, 28 states have decided to pull back. But basically, it's a whole situation with workers overall. The labor participation rate is very low. When I was Secretary of Labor, the average labor participation rate was about 66.4% from 2001 to 2009. And the at high point, labor participation rate was about 67.7%. Now the labor participation rate is 61.6%. Wow. It even dropped 0.1% from the last month. So basically and pre-COVID, the labor participation rate was already very low at 63.3%. So with a workforce of 157 million workers, we're seeing about 4.8 million workers who have just left the workforce, and they're not coming back. Now, this is a very serious problem because if we do not have enough workers to fuel the recovery, that will slow the economy, obviously, but it will also put inflationary pressures on everything. And so we're seeing, for example, restaurants that can't open the hours that they need to or fill up their restaurant with the usual number of tables because they don't have workers. We're seeing that also in trucking. We're seeing that in railroads and in construction. Construction has improved somewhat. Last month, construction actually lost 3,000 jobs. So this month's last month's job report, which came out last Friday, was very weak.
Oh, it was terrible. It was a horrible jobs. I'm curious what you think about the eviction moratorium extensions. This is the equivalent to unemployment compensation bumps, but if you remove or put on a moratorium the ability to evict someone for non-payment of rent, it reduces the pressure on people to work. I mean, it's even economically rational in some cases not to work. I think all of these incentives have to be removed to stay home.
Well, first of all, we want to make sure, of course, that those who are vulnerable should be taken care of. But the government should not be competing with the private sector when it comes to compensation, whether it's in the form of monetary benefits, debt forgiveness, rent relief, or other subsidies. If it does, the labor shortage that we see today could become the norm for tomorrow, and that would be devastating for the quality of life that Americans have come to expect, as well as for our standing in the world and ability to compete globally.
Last question, Secretary. The Savannah port story that I read yesterday about how the port of Savannah is booming, they're all booming in the United States. Isn't this also an opportunity for port operators to expand and rebuild, though?
This is an excellent opportunity. It's very busy, but actually, expansion should be occurring all the time. And some airports, to switch to airports rather than ports, during the COVID, a lot of airports took that downtime to expand and to rehabilitate and repair. And they were aided, of course, by some of the CARES dollars that was passed in March 27th, 2020, the previous year. But the overall situation is one of a labor market slowly recovering from the pandemic, struggling to recover, but faced with significant worker shortages, especially when there are 11 million unfilled jobs. Now, this week, we're going to be seeing the new JOLTS study. It's called the BLS. It's a monthly BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics, Job Openings and Labor Turnover Survey. This is a dynamic measurement as to how many jobs are available within the economy. And we currently have about 11 million jobs that are vacant, so that are seeking workers. And GDP in the second quarter grew at a revised rate of 6.7%. Inflation is running at 5.2% on an annual basis. So what it again is that the workers are suffering as well because their wages are not increasing as rapidly. So
we will look for the JOLT report. Elaine Chao, former Secretary of Labor and Transportation, thank you. The update is useful, and I'm very glad to have the first-person report on Secretary Shultz Memorial as well. Thank you, Madam Secretary. She always a wealth of information. Of course, when you've done as many jobs as Elaine Chao has, you're always going to know what's going on out there. I remind everyone, Alliance Defending Freedom, Alliance Defending Freedom. Tom Tradup can't get me any audio actuals today because he's wandering around in a bathrobe because the Alabama Crimson Tide were beat, and he's a little bit stunned. But just trust me, the Alliance Defending Freedom needs your help. I need you to help them via HughHewitt.com. Their banner will come up at top. Don't forget as well, ReliefFactor.com. Next hour, I'm talking with Stanley McChrystal, who remains one of the great runners, even after some spine surgery he talks about in the book Risk. He runs and runs and runs and runs. He's older than I am. And why does he do so? He just stays in great shape. And if you want to stay in great shape, do ReliefFactor.com. 1995 gets you started. 1995 gives you Icarian, Curcumin, Resveratrol, and Omega every day in an easy to open, easy to swallow set of 4 natural supplements. The only ones I take. The only thing I take is ReliefFactor.com. And doctor's pills, yes, but I mean, I'm not a supplement guy. I never take any supplements except ReliefFactor.com, proven by science to help your body fight off inflammation, the minor aches and pains of aging and exercise. Coming right back, America. Stay tuned. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Alliance Defending Freedom.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
I have never seen.
Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
So Joe Biden thinks that an illegal chasing a U.S. senator into a ladies' room is part of the process and happens to everybody. Wow. I'm guessing nobody's able to chase Joe Biden into the men's room. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that it's not part of any process he has to face. It's unbelievable the way the machine, the beast, looks the other way when something as reprehensible as illegals harassing United States senators gets a pass. I saw a great tweet, David Harsanyi, who we've interviewed on this show before. Our country is so free that illegal immigrants can yell at senators in public without worrying about any repercussions. That's how free we are as a country. To all the lunatics on the left who tell you how oppressive we are as a nation, how racist this country is, how miserable the United States of America is, we're so free that we let illegals harass, maybe criminally, U.S. senators, and we don't do anything about it. Tell me why these illegals harassing senators shouldn't be deported. Give me a good argument against that.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
About your time in the White House, what kind of a ride that was for you. We played this clip at the beginning, this insanity. Why didn't you mention this? You mean the thing I talked about 2 days ago at length from this point? But he didn't tweet about it. I mean, just the sheer insanity. Talk to us about what that was like to live through. And then give us your take on what went wrong in the Trump administration. What went right, what went wrong?
So, I mean, look, it was tumultuous. It was intense. I think that, look, this goes back to what we were just talking about. Trump upset the apple cart. And every president, both parties that come in, need three groups, right? You need the press, you need donors, and you need sort of the permanent K Street lobbyist types. Trump's view was, if you want to join me, great, but I don't need you. And what happened was...
Because he won without them.
Yes. And they were... But here's the thing. I'll say it in a very PG way, but like they're used to having their butt kissed. And they're used to people saying, I'd love to have you come over to my house in Georgetown for a dinner party where we can discuss the ins and outs of the NATO, it's like they want you to, and he was like, look, I'm doing this. I'm doing it this way.
If you want to join me,
If you want to join me, great, but I don't need you.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at Rumble.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. That's my TWA.US music. I always have Adam cue that because my friend Jan Gennaro always, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see I'm holding up postcards. When the Wild Adventure gets together to fish in Montana, the men who go up there will often pen me a, "Ha! We're here and you're not" note. Hugh, I don't know where you found this guy Jan Gennaro, but I'm forever grateful to him and TWA. I'm committed to growing TWA and helping it thrive. John Brandt, Bainbridge Island, Washington. And he sends me this beautiful picture of the Madison Range. If you could see this, and maybe you can zoom in, Ben. It's amazing. Victor, TWA has been the single most inspirational week of my life. Oh, okay, that's good, writes Victor. TWA brought 9 men together for a reason. I believe that 8 of us were here to put ourselves in the place of a fellowship. Jason can't write anything. I can't read your handwriting, Jason, in San Antonio, but it's a beautiful place. Dear Hugh, thank you for all you do to support TWA. I had a life-giving experience. Wow, what an amazing 5 days, writes Chris. That last one was from Brandon Harder. Oh, I know Brandon. I know who that is. And then, dear Hugh, wow, what an amazing 5 days. I didn't know to what extent I would be grateful for that, writes Chris. If you want a place at TWA in 2022, you better go to twa.us today. I'm serious. This thing always sells out, and they taunt me, but I don't mind being taunted when it's by people who are having the best week of their life up at the young guns are for 35 and younger, and the rest go to 35 and older, twa.us. But it always sells out. There are only about 300 spaces every year. I tell you about it early so that my audience gets in there and listens. Now, I got to go back to the jobs number, because why am I going to Atlanta on Wednesday with Brian Westbury and Alfredo Ortiz to talk about the economy at the Atlanta History Center? AM 920, theanswer.com if you want to get a ticket. And yes, Herschel Walker will be there. And yes, you get to meet Herschel Walker. So go over to AM 920, theanswer.com and get a ticket. The reason we are out there is that stagflation is the worst thing that can happen to a Western economy. I remember it well. I came out of college in 1978, and we were in the middle of stagflation, which lasted another 4 years. A wretched time. After 2 years of living on grilled cheeses at the beach and working for Richard Nixon in San Clemente, I went to school rather than try and find a job, 78 to 82, because those were bad years to find a job. It was great years to work for Richard Nixon and go to law school. Stagflation is a terrible time for businesses. Now, stagflation is marked by high inflation, which we have, and by low employment. Listen to what people said. Here's the Squawk Box report on Friday when the job number came out, cut number 2.
Things are coming down pretty rapidly. We just have this jobs report. Steve, what do you see?
194.
Whoa.
I see 194,000. That is real low.
Real low indeed. Christina Romans, the CNN economics reporter, cut number 5.
Hot off the presses, a brand new jobs report, a look at the state of the economy. Chief business correspondent Christine Romans with the new details. What does it say?
All right, let me just run through the top line numbers for you here, John, because it's a real brain teaser. 194,000 net new jobs added, way less than anybody expected, and less than last month and the worst of the year.
Okay, so we've heard from CNBC and CNN. What did Fox Business report on Friday morning? Stephanie Pomboy.
I think the number, getting to your point about, workers having, companies having a hard time getting workers in this environment of endless stimulus, the number from this morning's report to focus on is 183. Minus 183. That's how 183,000 people dropped out of the labor force in September. That's an amazing number, and it's not a good one.
That's a terrible one. Labor Secretary Marty Walsh said this, cut number 6.
Also in the educational sector, there's something going on there that we have to do some more research on, in particularly the educational public sector number. I think a lot of people expected with school starting that would see that number a lot higher, and certainly that's the number was in some cases not as I'll say it was disappointing.
Yeah, very disappointing. Everything, terrible jobs report. That's why you should, if you're in Atlanta, come out to the Atlanta History Center on Wednesday night. AM 920, theanswer.com. I really want Brian Westbury to be heard by as many people as possible. Alfredo Ortiz, if you're a small business owner and you can't hire people, I want you to hear from him. I also want to find out, I've never seen Herschel Walker work a room before or give a speech. I'm fascinated by this. The great running back from Georgia days is going to be there. I don't endorse in primaries, but I'm happy to appear with Herschel. Looking forward to that on Wednesday night. But you have to go to am920theanswer.com if you want a ticket. It's a ticketed event. I don't want people showing up at the Atlanta History Center and thinking they can walk in. That's not the case. You got to get a ticket. am920theanswer.com. Glenn Byers, my buddy, offered to take me to the varsity, but I can't do it. I'm leaving the very next morning early. I got to go back to California. I am a dermatologist delight. Irish Catholic kid who was a lifeguard in the 70s. And so back to California for a procedure, but I'll be fine. I might be wearing an eye patch for a few. I think I might bring back Talk Like a Pirate Day. It's a September. Normally I might be wearing that eye patch next week, but I'll be fine. Don't go anywhere, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Job Creators Network.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
Somehow it's convinced black people that they're the good guys. Never mind the skanky history of the Democratic Party. That was a party of slavery. There is a whole big cottage industry for racism. If racism went away, a lot of people would be unemployed.
The mob during the Minneapolis riots following the death of George Floyd. A bunch of white thugs, frankly, burning down the city's traditional black and Asian business district.
They're racist, racist, racist. Everything's racist.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
There is this question of, is America becoming a safer country or a more dangerous country? So Merrick Garland did not issue a memo condemning the fact that murders are up 30% since last year. 30% murders are up. So murders are up 30% in the last year. And Merrick Garland instead issues a directive saying that we're not going to go try to find the spike in violent crime, like the abolishing police force, BLM Incorporated, how these ideas of CRT are actually resulting in more people being dead.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
In light of the belief of the CDC that 99%, 99% of the, help me out here, of the vaxxed, 99% of those hospitalized are not vaxxed, right? That's the claim. Or deaths. Okay. I think it's both hospitalized and deaths. Anyway, so if that's true, why do people give a hoot if people are not vaxxed? They're clearly not affecting the vaxxed. Right? Given the spectacular success rate of the vaccination, why do you care if the next guy is vaxxed or not? And don't tell me, because they're taking up hospital space. So are motorcyclists who don't have helmets. So are folks who had men who had unprotected sex during the AIDS epidemic. So are cigarette smokers for a while. This is a new thing. You're taking up hospital space. So there is no threat to you who are vaccinated by the unvaccinated. You can't have it both ways. It's 99% effective, but you must get vaxxed. It's all about control. I told you that. That's how I began the hour. No, I actually began the hour about the Seattle city attorney race. But I want you to understand what this is about. You have the audacity to defy the left? F you. That is all it is about. That is what it is about for Joe Biden. The weakest, wimpiest guy to ever hold the office of president. He is the antithesis of a leader. We have a sheep as president.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
The public would be outraged if they knew the truth.
Why do you think our politicians are not on the sidewalk right now talking to you?
Don't have no respect.
The old wall randomly turns into a guardrail, followed by miles of open border. Human trafficking.
That journey is extremely dangerous.
The 7-year-old girl died in the desert.
From the country of India.
A great pillar of the community was killed by a man who had been deported at least twice.
This little urn contains the ashes of my son. His dreams cut short forever.
We're so worried about other countries' problems, and we don't even focus on our own.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
Obviously, you won't necessarily know the answer to this question per se, but what is the deal with Republicans? Because I'm sitting here thinking, what can be done? I mean, these people are essentially, in my mind, political prisoners, and I don't understand why Republicans, when they have an opportunity to call out injustice and to get on the offense, it's just this is just weird to me. I don't understand if Republicans, the leadership, if they're intimidated, if they don't want to go up against a black man, or if they're scared of being branded racist. I don't understand this. Besides the fact that, okay, they don't necessarily like Trump, we're all realizing that. But for the sake of the integrity of our Justice Department, you would think that more Republicans would stand up.
Republicans gave Lisa Monaco, the deputy AG who's in charge, an Obama loyalist, a Russian collusion perp, a anti-Trumpist who was on CNN for 4 years. They gave her almost a unanimous confirmation, Carl. 48 Republican senators voted to put Lisa Monaco, a well-known Obama loyalist, in charge of the Justice Department. 20 Republicans voted to put Merrick Garland in charge of the Justice Department. They didn't even put up a minimal fight when Biden presented those two. And so now they're up. Yeah. So, I mean, they're cowards. They're complicit. You go down the list. I don't know. But the real battle next year, Carl, is going to be in the Republican Party, not the Democrats. We need to clean house almost entirely. These are not the people
the final word.
who can lead us against the fight.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
If you're not vaccinated, you should be in one of those little ice huts out in the middle of a lake at Lake Winnetonka in the middle of Minnesota in the freezing cold. You should sit out there for all of the winter. Just sit in that little booth. That's how you should spend Christmas. I'm not kidding you. You know what this crap does? It's going to start making people hesitant about going forward at all. This is getting to a point where the opposite effect is occurring. I mean, Fauci is making this up as he goes. He says something stupid on Sunday. By Monday, he's trying to spin. He's backpedaling.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
This feeling can pick you up every time you fall.
Every time I take one step forward.
When Wright came in this morning, he wants to fight you.
No one expected this out of him.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway live on this Monday morning. Coming up at the bottom of the hour, General Stanley McChrystal joins me, retired United States Army, to talk about his new book on risk. But I begin this hour with a former law student. In fact, when anyone ever mentions Henry II's turbulent priest comment, I always think of Timothy Sandefur, top left corner of the law school classroom. I've been teaching for 25 years, and if anyone says meddlesome priest or turbulent priest, I think of Timothy Sandefur. I'd be talking about the train limit law of 1912 and how it applied to trains of 14 freight or 70 passengers length. And Sandefur would say, "You've got that backwards, Professor. It's 14 passengers and 70." And, that's what he did. And I am hoping that this new Supreme Court case he is into gets to the Supreme Court, that they grant cert, and he gets to argue it, because I'm going to go over and see him correct the Chief Justice. That's what I'm looking forward to, Tim Sandefur. Good morning.
Good morning. Actually, you remind me of the time that I attended a presentation by Justice Scalia about a year before his death, where he made the mistake of saying that the slaughterhouse cases of 1873 was correctly decided. I shouted from the audience that was incorrect, and a friend of mine came up to me afterwards and said, "Well, you finally got to argue a case in front of Justice Scalia."
Well, you had practice in my classroom. You really are. It's really quite something to have a brilliant mind always correcting you on many things, factual and legal. Tim, but you were passionate about the Brett Keane case, and I know why. And I can't even actually believe that the Indian Child Welfare Act exists. I don't profess to understand why it exists, why it isn't prima facie unconstitutional, but why don't you explain to me? Has it got something to do with the sovereign constitutional status of the tribes?
Well, that's the excuse that's often given. So this is a law that was passed in 1978 that restricts the ability of non-Native American adults to adopt children of Native American ancestry, and that restricts the ability of states to protect these children against abuse and neglect. Now, we're not talking about kids who live on reservations. This law does not apply on reservation. We're talking about children who are genetically eligible. That is, their ancestry entitles them to membership in an Indian tribe. So these are not necessarily children who are actually members. It's just kids who could become members of tribes. If these kids are being abused or neglected, the state government cannot come in and rescue them from abuse and neglect unless the state officials prove a higher standard of evidence than is the requirement for kids of other races. Now, that sounds complicated, but what it boils down to is this. If a black child or a white child or an Asian child is being abused or neglected by their parents, the state could come in and take that child into foster care if it has evidence of that abuse and neglect. If it's a child of Native American ancestry, then the state has to have more evidence of abuse. And if we're and in some cases, a parent is so abusive that the state has to terminate the rights of that parent in order to protect that child, which is a severe step, right? But if we're talking about kids of other ancestries, Asian kids, Hispanic kids, the standard of evidence that applies there is what they call clear and convincing evidence. But with Native American kids, you have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt with the testimony of expert witnesses that the child is in immediate danger. And what that means is it is literally easier to put a defendant on death row than it is to find an adoptive home for a child of Native American ancestry in this country. It's
I'm astonished by this, Tim Sandefur, for a number of reasons. Number one, I've done work on the child welfare system in America. I know it's broken, very, very badly broken, from East Coast to West, from North to South, in 1,000 different ways. It is dysfunctional. I was unaware until you wrote about it and informed me about Brett Keane that there was built into one portion of that complicated array of statutes, 50 states worth, plus the District of Columbia, and now tribal consideration, on the face of it, distinction based on race. Now, Chief Justice Roberts has said the way to end racism is to end the use of race. I can't believe this survives Supreme Court review.
Oh, I certainly am shocked that it has survived as long as it has myself. But the excuse that's typically given is, well, when you're talking about Native Americans, you're not really talking about race because tribes are like political organizations. So the distinction here isn't racial, it's really political. Well, even if you buy that theory, it doesn't apply here because we're talking about children who have no political connection to a tribe at all, who don't speak a native language, who don't practice a native religion, who have never even visited tribal land. There was a case about 5 years ago in Southern California involving Lexi, a 6-year-old girl who had been living in foster care for 4 years of her life. She was her great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather was a full-blood Choctaw Indian, and as a result, she qualified as an Indian child under this law, even though she did not speak Choctaw, did not reside on Choctaw lands, did not practice a native religion, and really had no idea that she was Choctaw in the eyes of the law. And as a result, ICWA deprived her of the legal protections that apply to children of other races, and she was snatched from the arms of the foster family she had lived with for 4 years of the 6 years of her life, and sent to live with race-matched strangers in Oklahoma instead on the orders of the tribal government. It's a shock.
No, Tim Sandefur, I taught you better than to say ICWA. You know, I really did. I failed there as a professor when you snuck ICWA in there. You want to explain what that is again?
Yeah, ICWA stands for the Indian Child Welfare Act, and you're right. Not only should I not use the technical jargon, but it gets very confusing because when you're talking about Indian law, everything sounds the same. Like there's IGRA, the Indian Gaming Regulatory. There's lots of laws that all have a similar sounding name.
Well, you're with the Goldwater Institute. I am curious how this came into your ken. How did you? I know you were one of the great advocates of liberty and a free society in America, and the Goldwater Institute proposes that. But how did you get wrapped up in Burkine?
Well, my predecessor at the Goldwater Institute was a guy named Clint Bolick, who's now on the Arizona Supreme Court. And this was kind of a passion project for him when he was a lawyer with the Institute. And then when I came in, I kind of took over the project from him. And so that was about 6 years ago. I had never even heard of the Indian Child Welfare Act at that time. And so, I come in and they drop this big pile of paper on my desk and say, read this. And I was absolutely amazed that this law exists. It is probably the most unconstitutional law ever passed. What I mean by that is it violates so many different constitutional restrictions. You're talking about race-based discrimination. You're talking about the feds coming in and telling states how they can operate their own child welfare systems, which is a matter of state law only. The feds have no business in the child welfare business. This law even ignores technical rules about how courts obtain jurisdiction because it says that tribal courts can decide child welfare cases of children based on the fact that their genetic ancestry falls within that tribe, even if the child has never even visited that reservation. I mean,
let me geek out. Let me geek out for a second and ask you, is it Section 5 of the 14th Amendment? Are they holding that up as an answer for how this survives?
No, it's not, which is really remarkable because that would be a much stronger argument. Instead, they argue that, no, it's the Indian Commerce Clause because I guess children are somehow subject to commerce.
Oh my gosh. So, Tim, when does is it up on CERT? What can people do and how do they help the Goldwater Institute?
If you go to our blog, which is indefenseofliberty.blog, you can find out more about this case and our other. We've done about a dozen Indian Child Welfare Act cases across the country on this issue. So please check that out. And then Brackeen, the petitions were filed with the Supreme Court about a month ago now, and there's been an extension. So we're going to hear more about this toward the end of the year. I think it's almost certain that the Supreme Court will take this case because the tribes, the federal government, the states, and the adoptive parents have all asked the court to take the case. So I think it's very likely.
Justice Gorsuch really threw a spanner into Native American law 2 years ago. And
he definitely did.
Yeah, and so where do you think he is on this?
Well, I think it's possible to persuade him. What you have to do is show that this law is actually bad for Indians. We're not talking about affirmative action here. We're talking about a law that takes away legal protections from Indian children based on their race, and show that this is not, when we're not talking about reservation land. Everybody agrees that tribal governments should decide child welfare cases on reservation land. We're talking about kids who live next door in residential neighborhoods next door to their peers of other races who enjoy stronger protections against abuse and neglect than they enjoy based on their genetic ancestry. I think if that point comes clear, I think Justice Gorsuch will see why this law is so unconstitutional and so wrong.
I hope that they grant cert. I hope that you get a chance to argue this, Tim Sandefur. And if you do, will you arrange for me to be in the first row so I can laugh at the justices when you interrupt them interrupting you?
Oh, no question you'll be there, Professor.
All right. Tim Sandefur. Always all my law students, I love you all like everyone loves their children. But clearly my favorite was Sandefur because he is the most meddlesome law student ever. Speaking of lawyers, Alliance Defending Freedom does what Tim does, but they do it for religious liberty every day. Head over to HughHewitt.com and make a contribution. I'm sure they'll also file a brief on behalf of supporting Tim. Alliance Defending Freedom needs your help. Their banner is over at HughHewitt.com. Please go and do that. Be generous. I'll come right back. Give you a market update next on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show brought to you by Sierra Pacific Mortgage. For more info, call 888-888-1172.
Platt Liebau for townhall.com. It's not surprising that Joe Biden wants to turn the page on his incompetent withdrawal from Afghanistan and the abandonment of U.S. citizens and our allies there. Almost as unsurprising as the media's craven effort to help him. Even as Americans remain hostage in Afghanistan and the Taliban flaunts the military equipment we left them, the news has shifted to other domestic stories. It's inexplicable. Their silence is a scandal. But sadly, we've grown used to seeing the media try to influence public opinion in a way that benefits their chosen candidates. Let's hope that this time, Americans see through the manipulation. So long as America is being humiliated by a group of Taliban savages and our fellow citizens or captives, we deserve the full story. We should demand that the media give it to us. I'm Carol Platt Liebau.
The Pepperdine Graduate School of Public Policy, for those considering careers in politics and policy.
Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
So Joe Biden thinks that an illegal chasing a U.S. senator into a ladies' room is part of the process and happens to everybody. Wow. I'm guessing nobody's able to chase Joe Biden into the men's room. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that it's not part of any process he has to face. It's unbelievable the way the machine, the beast, looks the other way when something as reprehensible as illegals harassing United States senators gets a pass. I saw a great tweet, David Harsanyi, who we've interviewed on this show before. Our country is so free that illegal immigrants can yell at senators in public without worrying about any repercussions. That's how free we are as a country. To all the lunatics on the left who tell you how oppressive we are as a nation, how racist this country is, how miserable the United States of America is, we're so free that we let illegals harass, maybe criminally, U.S. senators, and we don't do anything about it. Tell me why these illegals harassing senators shouldn't be deported. Give me a good argument against that.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at Rumble.
The public would be outraged if they knew the truth.
Why do you think our politicians are not on the sidewalk right now talking to you?
Don't have no respect.
The old wall randomly turns into a guardrail, followed by miles of open border.
Human trafficking.
That journey is extremely dangerous.
The 7-year-old girl died in the desert.
From the country of India.
A great pillar of the community was killed by a man who had been deported at least twice.
This little urn contains the ashes of my son. His dreams cut short forever.
We're so worried about other countries' problems, and we don't even focus on our own.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store. Go to
Tesla was a
salemnow.com.
genius. His most amazing discoveries thought to be written in a lost journal. Now, in the right hands, it could revolutionize the 21st century.
You can stop an earthquake. Doesn't that mean you could start one too?
That's why that notebook should never fall into the wrong hands.
Shall we stop this thing?
Save the universe!
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
just feel like I'm picking up every.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt live inside the Beltway on a half of Victory Monday. Ohio State won over the weekend, but not the Browns last night. They lost a thriller in SoFi Stadium to the Chargers. ESPN reporting this morning that the Browns scored 42 points, had 532 yards of offense, and 0 turnovers. This makes them the first team in NFL history, including the playoffs, to lose a game after you scoring 40 points and 0 turnovers, or 40 points, 500 yards, and 0 turnovers. So it's really not a problem game. The Chargers are pretty good. And Mike Gallagher and Mark Davis are throwing darts at me. They bounce off. I laugh in their general direction, to quote sort of Monty Python, because two starting cornerbacks out, 2 starting tackles out, left and right tackle out, and Jarvis Landry on the sidelines. We'll be fine. We'll be fine. 14-3 is a great record for the Browns. If we go, we got to lose one more, right? We're 3-2. 14-3 will be fine. Time for the market update brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com. Instead of running over Friday's numbers, I want to read to you this Wall Street Journal story this morning, and this is why you need to get to AndrewandTodd.com. Soaring home prices are roiling appraisals and upending sales. Nicole Friedman writes about the dilemma that thousands of homeowners are running into. They agree to buy a house in this wild market. They get pre-qualified from AndrewandTodd.com, for example, or they call 888-888-1172, and Andrew Del Rey or Todd Abakian or one of their team walks them through everything. They get pre-approved. They get a letter. They go in. They get an agreed-upon price. They manage to get to the front of the line. They get the deal. And then an appraiser shows up and says, no, the house isn't worth as much as you agreed to buy it for, and we won't lend you the money. An underwriter caves. That won't happen with AndrewandTodd.com. They will be prepared. They will also help you prepare the appraiser not to make that mistake, to get caught behind the market. The market has been going up so fast, home inflation prices is so high that appraisers who have to show up and tell the underwriter that the house is worth what they're borrowing it for, if they're lazy or they're behind the data set, they will screw you up. They will screw up your dream home. Don't get caught in that situation. Use AndrewandTodd.com. They can't guarantee that your loan will get approved, but they can guarantee you that you'll have the best shot possible because they are the best in the business. 888-888-1172. AndrewandTodd.com. I want to cover one more thing with you before General McChrystal arrives next hour. Elizabeth Warren. We got a lot of problems in this country right now. A lot of problems. Many, many issues. And I'm going to talk about some of them with General McChrystal. Elizabeth Warren went on MSNBC this weekend to talk about one of them, or at least what she thinks is one of them, cut number 9.
Look, I have been clear about where I am on the filibuster for years now. And I have also been absolutely clear. When I ran for president, I ran in part on saying I will get rid of the filibuster. In fact, I think I may have been either the first or the only one who said that. Ultimately, a lot of people have come around. If we want to make the changes we need to make in this country, starting with protecting our democracy, then we need to get rid of the filibuster.
So why won't your colleagues come on board for that? Do they just not get the threat to democracy? Are we living in different universes?
Stop right there. This is Mehdi Hassan, who used to be with Al Jazeera and has now gone to MSNBC because I guess they were drifting too far to the left, from the far left, because he's just so out there. A threat to democracy. Either you're a constitutionalist or you're not. Either you believe in the Constitution or you don't. Either you understand that separation of powers and dual sovereignty between state and local government and the federal government are useful things. Either you understand that bicameralism commits under the Constitution to each chamber their own rules, and the Senate has a right to control its own rules, and it takes 51 senators to change the rules. It's got nothing to do with democracy. It's got everything to do with constitutionalism and the rule of law. So I am sad that there's yet another voice out there who doesn't know the first thing about constitutional law. But that's just a problem in broadcast. Coming up after the break, the interview with Hugh Hewitt, I take up the new book, Risk, a user's guide by Stanley, McChrystal, and Buterico. Next, Risk, a user's guide on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Curious about what you're missing in the Hughiverse? The After Show? 21 years of Hugh Hewitt shows on demand? Go to www.hughiverse.com right now, where it's only 99 cents to join for the first month. www.hughiverse.com.
These most amazing discoveries, thought to be written in a lost journal. Now, in the right hands, it could revolutionize the 21st century, but in the wrong hands,
If you can stop an earthquake, doesn't that mean you could start one too?
that's why that notebook should never fall into the wrong hands.
There's an old brown battered notebook in my office at work. You have to find it, take it, and keep it hidden at all costs. The G20 leaders meeting downtown, they're in danger. In fact, the whole of downtown could be in danger.
If we are to build the superhuman, we must first eliminate those who are flawed.
People are created equally. All of downtown, the high-rises were built on rollers to withstand horizontal shakes. A vertical quake this size could collapse half of downtown.
We have commenced the countdown.
Shall we stop this thing?
Save the universe!
Powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized to go after perceived domestic enemies. And that's very scary.
Our constitutional democracy enshrines the peaceful transfer of power.
We are now all rooting for his success. The peaceful transition of power is one of the hallmarks of our democracy.
We don't live in the United States of America as any of us would like to understand it.
We have a peaceful transition of power process. That's not what happened.
They interviewed General Flynn, and they did it in what was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
This is what third world security states do. They spy on their political opponents like this.
This is part of a concerted Russian influence operation.
Russian interference.
They colluded. They were in on it.
He would constantly say, I have seen evidence of collusion.
Until this is released, I can't comment. I can't go into the particulars.
Russians, I'm not going to be specific as...
He knew he could just say it on TV and then hide behind, well, it's all classified, I can't get into it.
Well, it's classified. You can't see it. Collusion. You just got to be willing to see it.
New York's Daily News ran this front page, Trump is Hitler.
How could 62 million Americans vote for Hitler? Are 62 million Americans Nazis?
We really almost thought it was a joke. Like, really, you're not going to accept that you lost this election?
Then they see the Russia collusion narrative sitting right there in front of them and say, why don't we just say that he cheated?
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence. It's given people who are bad faith actors a license to do whatever they want because they literally feel like they're fighting Russian spies and Nazis.
Russiagate has been the most egregious abuse of everything that was supposed to have been good about our government.
The thing that they were investigating the Trump campaign for is what they themselves were doing.
Streaming on Salem Now.
¿Cuánto queda?
No queda nada. Que lo siento mucho.
How much is the time you can come to Christ when the Spirit of God calls you to the cross? Don't you hesitate.
Have you ever thought of going to seminary?
Madre, padre, ¿quién está listo para ser transformado por el poder de su palabra?
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
I have never seen in my life the orchestrated hatred to a group of Americans as I am seeing now. It's orchestrated hatred. You are allowed to hate the unvaccinated. Even if the unvaccinated had COVID already, and there is no scientific reason whatsoever for them to take as minimal a risk as it is the vaccine.
Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now.
Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt live inside the Beltway. The interview with Hugh Hewitt today is with General Stanley McChrystal, retired United States Army. General, good morning. Good to see you again.
It's good to see you. How are you?
I'm good. I want to begin by giving you my condolences on the loss of your colleague and classmate, General Odierno. I assume you guys spent a lot of time together over the course of as many decades as you spent in the United States Army.
We did. He was a great soldier, and more importantly, he was a great human being. So my thoughts to his family, but also to all his friends.
Now, General, we're here to talk about this, Risk, a user's guide, your brand new book along with Anna Butrico. I've had you on before twice to talk about My Share of the Task and Team of Teams, and then to talk about leaders. It seemed, first of all, I listened to half this book. I have never listened to you narrate before. Had you narrated either of the prior books?
I had done just the introduction to the prior books. This is the first time I did the whole book.
Well, when I get a book on Thursday and I'm doing an interview on Monday, I end up reading from the beginning and then taking the last third and listening during my hour-long trundles on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. You're very good at this, but how did you like the audiobook experience?
I didn't think I was very good. I mean, obviously, sit in a little booth, and when you read your own work, the problem is you go, boy, I should have written that better. Because when you read it out loud, you kick yourself. So I wanted to rewrite the book while I was in the booth, but it was a little late.
A little late. You also find little tiny errors. I don't know if that is what you also encountered, but my hat's off to you. It's a very good read. Most people are not very good. They should leave it to professionals. Here's a very good read. Let's talk about this book. Your first book, or the one that I brought to people's attention the most, Team of Teams, impacted how I did business. I think Risk is really a C-suite book for executives, people in the executive suite. I also think it's for MBAs who are rising and the consulting community, but it's also for moms who have to decide whether or not to let their kids walk to school by themselves. It's actually for everyone who has to assess and make decisions based upon risk. Fair summary, General?
Well, that was our goal. We wanted to make it approachable for everyone and not a scientific study. And so I hope we've done that.
You've done very well, but we've got to begin by explaining what the risk immune system is. Before I get the specific questions, why don't you give the overview of what you've decided to call the risk immune system?
Absolutely. We had an experience with risk. Everybody does through a lifetime. I had much more than my co-author Anna because I'm much older. But the reality was I had come to the conclusion that we don't handle risk very well. So I wanted to study it and see what we could make of it. And we came to the conclusion that the greatest risk to us is in fact us. It is not the threats out there, because many of them are impossible to predict and they really aren't as 10 feet tall and dangerous as we want to pretend they are. It's our own weakness or our vulnerabilities. And so I had done some work with a Yale immunologist, Christina Talbert-Slagle, a few years ago. And it struck me that the human immune system is a pretty interesting analogy to what we have to do with risk. And here's what I mean. Every day, the human body is attacked by an estimated 10,000 microorganisms. Threats, any one of which could make us sick or kill us. And yet we don't get up in the morning worried about it. You and I don't say, I wonder how my risk immune system, or my human immune system is today. Because it just seemingly effortlessly detects those risks, those threats. It assesses each to see if it's dangerous to us. It responds, typically by destroying them if necessary, and then it learns in the process, so it's smarter next time and more efficient. And so this detect, assess, respond, learn cycle protects us. And the only time we have to worry about it is when our immune system is weakened for some reason, autoimmune deficiency, or we're sick, or something else. Well, if you think about organizations and a society as just a big organization, when its risk immune system is weakened, it becomes vulnerable to things which really shouldn't be a huge threat to us. It shouldn't pose a great risk. If we think about risk, in fact, as the mathematical function between risks and vulnerabilities, or threats times vulnerabilities, threat times vulnerability equals risk, and you have no threats, you live in a world, a perfect world where nothing's out to get you, then that would be zero. So anything times zero is zero. So your risk is zero. But we don't live in that world. And so you look at our vulnerabilities and we say, well, if we could drive our vulnerabilities down to zero, that would be great. And we probably can't do that, but we have great control, agency over those. And so our ability exists to take what we've defined as 10 risk control factors: communication, narrative, timing, action, diversity, bias, adaptability, leadership, and so on, and make those elements as healthy as possible, both individually and then as a system. Then no matter what the threat is, we are better positioned to deal with it. You know.
Now, I don't want to preempt the particular discussion. I want to go through each of the factors with you, General. But what I want people to understand, the reason they want to get risk, is if your risk immune system is off. In other words, if you are poorly calculating whatever risk you're attempting to assess, you're going to live life in fear or you're not going to live life at all. You've got to get it right or you won't be able to be productive. If you're over cautious or under cautious, both, and there's a spectrum in which you can operate that is comfortable and smart. But if you over-prevent or you under-prevent, you're at risk.
That's right. And Hugh, call me Stan, please.
Not going to happen, General, but go ahead. So when you got Anna to sit down with you on this, and she's a young person, did she have the same understanding of risk that not because of age, but because you're being military, she wasn't military? Did you have different ecosystems of risk when you came together?
Very different. And that made it very healthy. Because in many cases, I saw threats and things that she didn't. I also saw gray areas that life teaches you. You know, you sort of have this binary view when you're young, when things are a little bit simpler, and you say this or this, and then life tells you it's never that simple. And so we came at it very differently. And that was important because we had these dialectic conversations as we tried to figure out what reality is.
You know, I particularly appreciated, General, the story you told, and I want to check up on your recovery. At the beginning of the book, you had spine surgery. Now, there's a bell curve in everything, literally everything. There's a 10% great and a 10% awful, and most of the stuff occurs in the 80%. You managed to pull the spine surgery that is ordinarily a very routine and not have the greatest one ever, but have one at the wrong end of the bell curve. So how are you doing on recovering from that?
Yeah, I'm doing great. After 5 spine surgeries, what happened? I had 2 earlier in my life, just beat up and issues, and then in the spring or the fall of 2019, the surgeon told me I needed to get most of my spine fused, and I had put it off as long as I could. But I went to a world-class guy up at New York Presbyterian in New York City. So, and he had actually operated on the son of a friend of mine who was a great football player. And so we had a great outcome. So I had him do it. A month after that, had big complications, had to go back in, and they had to basically do it again. And then a month after that, they had to go back in and do it again. And so in the course of 3 months, I had 3 spine surgeries. And, he had briefed me at the outset. He says, in a tiny percentage of cases, something can go wrong. And if you're like me, I said, well, I'm never in the tiny percentage. I never win the lottery. So what could go wrong?
But it's a great illustration of actually understanding the risk pattern that presented itself to you and still getting blindsided. Because you can't get rid of risk. You did the smart thing. You prepared as best you can. You still got hit. This is not a guide to invulnerability. I think that's the lesson I took away from it. You can do all this, and you're still not going to be invulnerable to risk. I also want to thank you because I've driven by the Braddock Canyon probably 1,000 times in my life. Now, I never run up Braddock. When I'm running in Northern Virginia, I stay on the lowlands by the river. You run up the hill. I compliment you on that. You're faster than I am. You've actually passed me a couple of times on the pathways. But that Braddock Canyon, I had no idea that was a Braddock Canyon, nor that you would hold up Braddock as an example, in this case, an example not to follow. Tell us about Braddock.
Well, it's so great. I had grown up on the story of General Edward Braddock when I was young, and you and I both lived very close to the home where he actually planned his expedition. And Braddock was a major general in the British Army who was told to go capture Fort Duquesne, which is where modern Pittsburgh is. And so to get from Alexandria, Virginia to Fort Duquesne was a long, and most of it, a very difficult journey. So he puts together this force, 2 regiments of which are British regulars, and then he's got some American militia, and then he's got a bunch of contract logisticians, meaning he's buying both transportation and supplies from local suppliers, which was really difficult. They were pretty sketchy, actually. So he puts this thing together, and he's going against a French fort, but largely against a threat that was Native Americans, American Indian tribes led by the French. And he had been warned before the expedition, hey, this is different. You're going into different terrain against a different kind of enemy. You got to approach this in a different way. But Braddock had a certain arrogance to him. He was not incompetent, but he didn't listen. He didn't take in those warnings from other people. And he put together this expedition that goes forward. It has all kinds of problems logistically. He's got young George Washington as an aide-de-camp. He's got young Daniel Boone driving one of his wagons. But they get there and they end up having a meeting engagement with the French and Indians, and they get badly defeated. And it was because he didn't adapt to the conditions. And it was almost a classic case of somebody who has the confidence that comes from knowing something, but the vulnerability in that knowing what they know is inappropriate for the situation they're in.
Now, that comes out of your discussion of diversity, and I want the audience to understand when General McChrystal talks about the need for diversity in a decision-making unit, it is not the diversity that drives most of the political arguments of today or the politically correct argument or the CRT argument. It is diversity of points of view and life experience. General Braddock did not absorb the George Washington proffered experience on fighting in the backwoods with the tribes. And as a result, he lost badly. When you encourage diversity, it's actually the sort of diversity I wish college campuses would more broadly embrace, and law school faculties of which I've been a member, which is diversity of worldviews, experience, and outlooks, because that will strengthen a risk assessment. Am I right about that, General?
That's exactly right. We get very superficial on diversity. And as I put in the book, we confuse diversity with equality of opportunity. And I think equality of opportunity is a legal right and it's a moral right and we should do it. But that's not why organizations should do it. Organizations, as you say, need different perspectives and experience, or they're going to have blind spots.
General, you enlightened me to Crimson Contagion, which was a risk assessment study run about pandemic. I had heard about it a little bit because I've been fairly close to the pandemic team that was under President Trump and know a couple of people on the pandemic team under President Biden, and I followed it obsessively. I used to warn about it obsessively in January of 2020 to the detriment of my audience. They thought I was nuts. I went back after reading Risk and got the Crimson Contagion case study out. I read it, 74 pages, I think, and it was issued by the Assistant Secretary of Health. Indeed, it did have the master control team, the master control cells, the HHS simulation cell. But on page 46, I found this. I'd love your reaction to this. During the exercise, a significant topic of concern centered around the inadequacies of existing executive branch and statutory authorities to provide Health and Human Services Department with the requisite mechanisms to serve successfully as the lead federal agency in response to an influenza pandemic. Exercise participants highlighted the need to codify policies and procedures for HHS to lead, direct, and source funding in response to all kinds of public health emergencies. So at the end of the risk assessment, which I wish had been taken seriously, they came up with the conclusion that we need more money and authority. Doesn't that undo the whole purpose of a risk assessment to come back and say, we're the answer that you need?
Well, it doesn't if they act on it. I mean, I'm actually surprised Crimson Contagion has gotten as little press coverage as it has, because as you saw, the scenario was remarkably similar to what played out in COVID-19. And the problems were remarkably clearly identified. And I realize it was only a few months before COVID-19, but this isn't a new problem. We've been struggling to get ourselves more prepared for these kinds of threats for a long time. And so I am very critical of people who shelved this thing and didn't take action.
Yeah. Do you think it would have been better? I took a big lesson away from this, which is the effectiveness of a risk assessment is going to be proportional to the seriousness with which it is taken by senior leadership, and senior leadership will not take it seriously unless they are actively involved in it. Fair conclusion?
Absolutely the case. We used to find if we do tabletop exercises or war games in the military, and if senior leaders aren't involved, then it becomes just sort of a briefing they get later. If they are involved, it's visceral to them.
And I read with great interest, because I've got a friend in the wargaming business who cannot get members of Congress to do a war game about Taiwan. And the reason they cannot do so is that the members of Congress don't have the clearances necessary to participate in a war game involving the aggression against Taiwan. How crazy is that system, General McChrystal?
Well, I think Hugh would need to fix that, because I don't think that's the only reason they don't do it. I think there's a desire on some people to be a step away, because if you're ignorant, you can say, I wasn't involved, and then you can criticize from the sidelines. If you get up close to something, you get a certain amount of responsibility because of that. But that's what we elect people for, to have that responsibility. And so I think it ought to be required, because in the middle of particularly a Taiwan crisis, it's going to be very, very dangerous. What we don't need is people who don't understand what's happening or don't understand what the different options are saying anything.
Your colleague and friend Admiral Stavridis is a regular guest on the show, and his new book 2034 is about how a Taiwan war can start very, very quickly, and I just can't believe we're not running the right risk. If I can go back to COVID, General, every single American, indeed every citizen of the world, is impacted by COVID to a lesser or greater extent, and I can tell from Risk, a user guide, your new book, that you've studied it quite closely. I've studied it quite closely. I want to run through some of the big errors as we do a kind of after-action report on the first year and a half. Number one error is the politicization of the crisis. I don't know how this could have been avoided, but I'm wondering what your response is to my assessment of the number one problem with the COVID response, politicization.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'd say it's number one, but I put it right up there. And I think there's a lot of people guilty for that. You can't pin that on a single person. You got to pin that on a system that includes the media, that includes political leaders, and then others from the sidelines as well.
I agree. Number two, early on, the CDC took unto itself the authority to develop a test to diagnose. They rejected the WHO test, they rejected industry tests, and then they blew the test. So they created a bottleneck on an essential ingredient early enough. Now, the CDC had a huge Q rating until this pandemic. Everyone reposed confidence in the CDC. That's shattered now. Do you think a long period of success makes a risk assessment even more urgent than perhaps repeated failure?
Yeah, I think so. And in the case of the CDC, everybody's going to have failures. I think the problem with the CDC failure, and they swung and missed at that one, but there was also a communications failure, because I don't think that the American people were informed, okay, we've made this decision, we're trying this, and oh, it didn't work, okay, we're going to try something else. I think they could have saved a lot of their credibility had it been very clearly explained in real time.
Let me follow up on that. Dr. Fauci was my guest 2 weeks ago. He's been a number of times on this program. I'm a big proponent of vaccine. I've already got my booster. I hope you have as well, General, if you're in the right category for that. I think you are. You and I are both in the right category for that. Dr. Fauci and I discussed the problem of the noble lie. Early on in the COVID crisis, the Trump administration, with Dr. Fauci's agreement, indeed, I think he pushed it, told the American people masks were ineffective and they did not need to get them. That recommendation came out of the public health bureaucracy because they were afraid of a run on masks and doctors not being able to get masks and hoarding occurring. I think it was a terrifically tragic mistake. What do you think of a noble lie communication strategy?
Yeah, I think it's very, very dangerous, and it almost never works out. I'm gonna tie it to some other things in life. You know, often we talk about the generals in Afghanistan lying to the American people, or, you know, in a very difficult financial crisis, a senior leader going up and saying, okay, the markets are sound and whatnot, when in fact they may not be. The danger with that is you are desiring to calm people, but as soon as the lack of honesty is known, you've undercut everything. And so I think you've got to understand that certain people in certain roles are going to have to say certain things or are going to say certain things. And the public has got to be mature enough to say, okay, the person who's saying the bank is sound, everything's fine, has a reason they're saying that. So the public's got to be smart enough to take that and nuance it a bit. But in the case of something like this, where I think we undercut long-term credibility very, very badly. I think the American people can take honesty. I think they could have stood up in front of people and said, here's what we don't know. We don't know if masks are essential. We think they might be because in previous viral, pandemics like this, they have been. But we don't have enough masks right now. So here's what we're going to tell you, but stay tuned. We're going to tell you everything we know as fast as we know it. And sometimes what we tell you will be wrong until we're going to correct it as we get more information. I think that kind of transparency would have set a completely different stage for our response to COVID-19.
Now, we are not at the end of the virus, so we can't have an after-action report, but we could have a hot wash right now of what we've done to date. I first heard the term hot wash when a retired SEAL, Brian Ferguson, gave a little speech on it, and he did it in 15 minutes. That was the format. I thought that's the greatest idea I've ever heard of. You talk about both hot washes and after-action assessments throughout Risk, the new book that you've written with Anna. Can you distinguish for the radio audience and the podcast audience the difference between a hot wash and an after-action report?
Absolutely, Hugh. We would do a combat operation, and you would literally land back in the aircraft, and you would assemble somewhere and do what we call a hot wash, because things were still hot. It was really important to do that because, one, memories didn't fade. People hadn't gotten together and talked to other people and changed their perception of certain events. And there were still emotions to things. So if somebody didn't do something the way you wanted them to do, that emotion was good because you table it, boom. And so it's a good chance to get information quickly, also to act on it. If you've got a real challenge, you sometimes need to act right away. An after-action review comes typically a few days later, and you've had a chance to assemble everybody, they're rested, they're not emotional anymore, you can organize a space for it, and you can go through a very systematic, first you review what happened, and you try to get a clear recording of what actually transpired. And it takes all the different participants to fill in that. And then from there you say, okay, what do we need to do better next time? And those are the lessons learned. And an after-action review, as we call it, is critical, but it's not that immediate flash to bang that a hot wash is.
Now, there are three major events in recent American history that would deserve either or both of a hot wash or an after-action event. One is COVID, which is, I guess, we're not at the beginning of the end, but we're at the end of the beginning here. There might be an Omega variant, there might be all sorts of things out there, but we have enough to study. Number two is January 6th, the insurrection and the occupation of the Capitol by rioters. And number three is the collapse in Afghanistan. From your perspective of advising the private sector from the McChrystal Group on when to do risk assessments and when to do after action reports, etc. Which of those three would you tackle first, and which of those three deserve one or both of the hot wash or after action report?
Yeah, I think all makes sense to study. I think COVID-19 really needs to be studied now. I think we need a COVID-19 commission like the 9/11 commission. I do think that there are some very near-term lessons learned that a hot wash would do, and we can probably clear the air on a number of things because there's still a bit of misperception and whatnot. But I think you need to put a commission on this one that'll take a couple of years probably to get to the bottom of it and produce a roadmap that really puts pressure on the federal and state and local governments to make some changes so we're better postured for next time. For January 6th, the problem with that is the emotions ran so high in the moment that the hot wash started being political within hours after the event.
Yes.
And the hot wash occurred on media. It didn't occur with a group of people in a room. And you almost lost that moment because you saw there was, people had a certain feeling and then 12 hours later, they were already posturing for something else. And so now I do think you need to have a study of that, but I am concerned that you're going to be able to get a study that is free enough of politics that you can really learn from it.